You're watching 535.
This is 535.
535.
You're watching 535.
535.
535.
535.
We're live on Capitol Hill, and 535 starts right now.
Good morning. Welcome back to 535. It is Thursday, which is usually flyout day on Capitol Hill, but not this week. A lot more on that later. We're going to get right into it. I'm Leanne Caldwell with my colleague Scott McFarlane. And first, we are going to start out with a bipartisan duo to talk a lot about housing. Republican Mark Alford of Missouri and Democrat Lou Correa of California. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
By the way, you're looking very Republican. I like that.
Thank you very much, and you look pretty Republican yourself.
So you both had a big win this week. The housing bill passed. We're going to talk a lot about that. But first, this is something you both worked on together. You are from Missouri, suburbs of Kansas City, very rural district beyond that. You are from Anaheim, California, Orange County.
Very urban.
Very urban. So how did the two of you come to partner on this bill? Do you have the same housing challenges in each of your districts?
And we're both realtors.
That's right.
Oh, well, is that
Recovering
is that the answer?
realtors.
Recovering
Okay.
realtors, that's
Okay.
correct. And I think across the nation in our areas, housing is a big issue. We're millions and millions of housing units short in America. In California, the housing shortage is unbelievable. In my district, it's terrible. And that's what's killing our economy. We've got to get back on track.
Lou and I co-chair the Bipartisan Real Estate Caucus here on Capitol Hill with over 130 members now. And it's been a very effective caucus because we realize we have to keep the American dream alive. Right now, the average age for a first-time home buyer is 40. When I was buying a home, and I think when Lou bought his first home, we were in our 20s.
Early 20s, that's correct.
And so we've got to get younger people realizing that the investment they make in a home now to build that equity, you can start realizing that when you get our age, you start realizing taking some of those that money out. But we've also have to make sure that the housing supply is there. And that's what this housing bill does. The 21st Century Road to Housing Act is going to make a huge difference for home buyers, not just first-time home buyers, but those looking to move up in their properties.
We want to make sure Americans can again believe that they can buy a home, their piece of America. I can remember when our family bought our first house. Our lives completely changed. That was kind of the first step to the middle class. And you can feel the difference. I want to make sure people in America that are struggling can also have that opportunity.
I want to ask you about your bill and then, of course, the difference with the Senate bill.
Yeah.
Even though there was an overwhelming House vote, overwhelming support of your bill, got to get it through the Senate, or you have to figure out how to connect the two pieces. Your bill has limitations on who can own certain levels of homes. Congressman Alford, explain, first of all, the key tenets of what you've got.
Well, first, I do want everyone to realize this is, Lou and I did not write this bill. This is a product from Mike Flood, Emmanuel Cleaver, and also French Hill and Maxine Waters, who on the Financial Services Committee got involved as well. We are supporting this effort. When it went over to the Senate, though, some senators in their wise discretion decided to add some things which I think were punitive towards home builders. Number one, that large investment owners or investment people around the country, these large institutional investors that routinely buy homes on the open market and turn them into rental properties, they wanted to put them out of business. They wanted to put the build-to-rent people, build-to-rent basically neighborhood, They're not all over the United States, but we have several in my district where a builder would go into a tract of maybe 50, 60 acres and build an entire neighborhood of freestanding family homes, single family homes, where people can enjoy a dog and a backyard and maybe a community pool. But they're rentals. And the feeling was on the Senate side that was putting a dent in home ownership.
They wanted to put a cap in how long the home could be a rental. You'd have to sell it after
Within 7 years. That would be like if you owned a huge apartment complex, someone coming in and saying, hey, we don't like it that you have this for renters. You must turn these into condos and sell them off within a year.
And that's important. Distinction there is important because we're talking about housing supply. You want to build more homes to rent. That's okay. Versus institutional investors, they want to come in and just buy homes. Buy homes to turn them into rentals. Increase housing supply.
But let me press you guys on this. You've got your proposal, which has got limitations on major companies owning major stocks of housing. The Senate has a caveat where if you're one of those groups that builds homes for rentals to build up the shortage of rental properties in America, you have to sell, in some cases, those rental properties within 7 years to either the person who rents it or to another private homeowner, a non-renter. How are you going to iron that out and figure out how to bridge that gap? First to you, Congressman.
Well, we did by setting the cap at 350. So if an institutional investor wants to own a portfolio of homes, they can own up to 350. They don't have to sell what they have now, but this will give the opportunity, make it better for home buyers who come in. Look, I used to be a realtor, and on the buyer's agency side, I dealt with this all the time. A starter home would go on the market, and there would be 5 to 7 contracts written within the first hour. And typically, the home seller would pick the all-cash deal with no inspections because that's what the institutional investors were able to provide. They had the bankroll to do that. They would fix them up and turn them into rental homes. So, go ahead.
Remember, in the good old days, when you had somebody who got foreclosed and that house went into the market, you'd figure the neighbor that was renting the house could buy in and come in and buy that house. But when we had institutional investors buying, they could buy 20 to 30 of those homes and essentially lock the neighbors, lock your friends and families out of that market. And that's what we're eliminating, but we're not essentially saying you can still build something to rent it, but you can't come in and buy and lock people out of that market.
Yeah, I'm from Las Vegas originally, and it's a huge issue in Las Vegas with the institutional or the investment buyers. Let me ask you specifically, though, how does this incentivize more building, and also how does it help people to break into the housing market? Because costs are still a huge issue.
NEPA, you streamline some of the federal rules, some of the federal bureaucracy, some of the federal regulation. You talk about micro mortgages for smaller, $100,000 mortgage loans. You look at the manufactured housing, streamline how you build manufactured housing to make it less expensive to build some of those manufactured homes. We're looking at every aspect of home ownership, living in a house, renting a house in the United States. This is our first big step forward. It's not a done deal. Yesterday I spoke to Governor Gavin Newsom of California. California is also trying to do the same thing. Again, all of us working together can move forward and start chipping away at the issue of home ownership.
I do want to say that I don't think we want a dramatic reduction in values and home prices in America. Once someone has realized that equity increase as a homeowner, you don't want it to go down in value. But we also have to make sure that we have a new Fed chair. Hopefully interest rates will be coming down. I think that plays a large part in it. And I also think increasing wages and opportunities for people to get in their homes. The down payment is a huge issue for people, to scrape together that down payment, to pay for insurance, the overall picture, and the monthly payment. And so we're working on some things to make sure, and I think we will be having additional things in a reconciliation package down the road, Reconciliation 3, that's going to help improve housing as well.
Mark is right. You're looking at homes, real estate. 10, 15% of our gross domestic product, but there's so much other economic activity that goes into home ownership. We want to make sure we hit it on all 8 cylinders.
Yeah, what about the down payment? Is there any discussion about reducing the percentage that is necessary? Is that something that Congress could do, or does it have to be bank directed? Because my husband entered the housing market back in a time when you needed $0 for a down payment. And that was, of course, there was the 2008 financial crisis that really changed that. Did the institutions go too far?
There are some down payment assistance, especially for first-time home buyers through the FHA program. USDA has some great programs right now. Of course, the VA, we just had the VA Secretary, Doug Collins, testifying before our Appropriations Subcommittee, and we were talking about VA loans. One thing that I want to work on, maybe Lou, you can help me with this, VA loans are discriminated against in the selling process. When you go to buy a house, you're going to be in competition with cash buyers, conventional buyers, FHA, USDA, and typically, if you are selling a home, you're not going to take the VA loan necessarily. You may not even accept a VA loan or a loan offer, which I think is wrong because it's a much more stringent appraisal process, and you got to jump through more hoops. But our veterans should not be discriminated against.
And there's some language in this big bill for smaller banks, to create smaller banks, smaller credit unions, to make sure they're focused on this area, to make sure they're focused on local loans. And what we want to make sure is these financial institutions begin to invest in local real estate and local deals. The down payment is important, but I think once we begin to shake up the market and make sure people want to buy these loans, make these loans to buyers, it's going to be a positive.
Let's look at the issue you just raised, Congressman Alford. The VA loans may be less attractive to a seller than somebody with a pile of cash in their hands who says, "Hey, here's my money, take it, I want to buy your home." It's hard to compete with that. What does Congress do to make the VA loan more attractive than the guy going to the major bank chain and saying, "Here, I've got the traditional Bank of America, most money down loan"?
I don't think you can make it more attractive, but what you can do is put it on a level playing field. I'm going to work with Chairman Bost, a good friend of mine who's chair of the VA committee here. That is the authorizing committee, and that's where this has to start. I've already had several conversations with him. But it shouldn't be a punitive deal to have a VA offer. They should be not looked at lastly.
It's looked at as bureaucratic to a seller.
Well, it's more hoops to jump through for the VA appraisal. They call it appraisal and not the inspection. And so many times realtors, they won't even look, they won't put it on the MLS listing that would be accepted as an offer. And I think that's wrong. I think, you're kind of dipping into private enterprise here, but it does fall under HUD regulations. Maybe that's something that they must at least entertain a VA offer.
Why don't they?
Let's look at the VA loans. Let's see what is it exactly that makes these loans unattractive.
Right,
and let's put them, like Mark said, on equal footing. Is it the interest rate? Is it the down payment? Is it something else? What is it that's going to take for you on the free market to actually sell that house with a VA loan?
Do you think it's discriminatory to not accept those loans? And is there a bias against perhaps that? Yeah.
We just got out of a hearing with Secretary Collins and Scott Franklin next to me, who's a veteran on the dais sitting next to me. He said, "I'm glad you asked that because I just experienced this."
Oh, really?
Veterans are at a disadvantage even though they have this loan program where you pay zero down and well earned. You should get this from the federal government. But you shouldn't be discriminated against because the process may be more difficult for the seller. They're going to take the path of least resistance. And as an agent, you have a fiduciary responsibility to your client to make sure that they get a good sell at a high price.
Is the VA trying to save some money by making those loans less attractive? If that's the case, we here at the federal level have to, divert some of those resources more to those VA loans to make them more attractive. At the end of the day, we have to take care of our veterans, okay? We invest in the VA, healthcare for our veterans. Let's make sure we also invest in proper housing for our veterans. Make sure we give them a product that's going to work for them once they finish serving our country.
Yeah. Getting back to the bill that passed the House yesterday, what happens in the Senate? Where does it go? Is the Senate going to pass it? Do you guys go to conference? Do you guys know?
I think there's pressure. One of the trepidations I had is really going up against the administration on this, because they wanted us, and President Trump was quite vocal in that, pass the Senate bill, pass the Senate bill. And we worked the proper channels through the White House and said respectfully, we don't think this is the best idea, and here's why. Mike Johnson went to bat for us. French Hill went to bat for us at the White House and convinced the president that, look, we can find some middle ground on this where we're protecting the housing industry, we're protecting builders, but we're also making laws that make sense.
Why did he want the Senate bill so much? Do
Well,
you guys know?
I'm sure he has a lot of reasons for that, but bottom line is, we've got to come up, I think we came up with a product that Congress will vote for it, and we did. Senate will hopefully vote for it as well, and moves it to the White House for a signature.
Did you have a sense why there were one party's defections only, and how you kept those defections low on your bill, Congressman Alford?
Say that again, the defections?
There were very few defections, very few no votes
Oh,
on your bill,
yeah,
and they were all inside your party. What was the issue there?
Well, we don't like the Senate too much, and we don't like them running roughshod over us, especially, Elizabeth Warren. I don't want her dictating housing policy in America. I'm sure she has some good ideas, but this is not one of them. And so I think on my side of the aisle, we trust in French Hill, we trust in Speaker Johnson. Steve Scalise was on board, entire leadership was on board, and I think we made a great case for why we needed to have a differing opinion from the White House, but work in concert to try to bring them along. And that's how this process should work. We don't need to be at odds. This is something that was very bipartisan. It passed on suspension yesterday, and a bill of this size normally doesn't pass on suspension.
And again, coming back to the focus of this bill, more housing. And the amendments we essentially forced on this legislation are to incentivize the building of more housing, whether it's to own or to rent.
We're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you for the next step for housing. You said this is the first kind of entry into it. You mentioned Reconciliation 3.0. I don't know if that's something that you would ever support. That's a party line bill, of course. It's probably going to be partisan. But is there one thing that you both agree on should be the next priority on this housing issue?
Bottom line for me, working with Mr. Alford here, it's not a Democrat or Republican issue. This is an American issue. My constituents sent me to Washington, D.C.
So what's the issue
not to
that's
fight
most important?
with Mark, but to fix the problem of affordable housing. And it is going back, in terms of me, the next step, going back to my local community, talk to the affordable housing people, talk to the realtors, talk to my colleagues and say, what's doable? Ultimately, in my opinion, it's building more housing, coordinating with the state of California, with the locals, making sure we're able to build more units back home. Because that, in my opinion, is going to bring down the price of housing, whether it's rental or to buy.
I think encouraging starter homes in America. Back when we started out, a starter home was 2-bedroom, 1 bath, maybe 2-car garage, certainly not 3, and now it's a 3,000 square foot house with granite countertops, wood floors, and a 2-car, maybe 3-car garage. That's not practical. We've got to get to smaller lot sizes in many areas. Cities have to adopt ordinances which will, and homeowners associations which will allow a smaller footprint for a house and get people into a $235,000 house rather than my area, a starter house of $450,000, and yours is $1 million.
This is $1 million. And in our area, again, the issue is density. A lot of cities don't like the word density. But you have smart construction, smart planning, you can build smaller homes, smaller lots, and have quality of life.
We have a very little time left, but we have a speed round we like to employ to learn about your districts, to learn about your communities. In the 4th District of Missouri, you just described what the housing situation is like. What's the cuisine situation like? What's the best food? And you can't say barbecue because you're outside of Kansas City. We'll take that off the list because that's too easy.
Well, wow, you stumped me now. We have one of the best steakhouses, continually rated one of the top 10 steakhouses in America. It's 80 years old. Some friends of mine own it, the Van Noys. It's called Jess and Jim's. And if you ever come to visit, and Lou, I want you to come visit, and we'll go to Jess and Jim's, and you will have the
On you, baby.
the Playboy ribeye, which is about this big.
Oh my goodness.
Congressman, if you get the Playboy ribeye, you'll need a photo that says Playboy ribeye as the caption.
Not a 7-course meal, but a 7-restaurant delight. Mexican, Middle Eastern, Vietnamese, Chinese, Korean, you name it, we have it in Central Orange County.
What's
You're
your
gonna
favorite
enjoy it.
cuisine?
All of the above.
All of the above. In Anaheim, you have the Mighty Ducks, you have the Angels. Sorry,
Disneyland.
what am I missing that's important in your district?
Disneyland, Mighty Ducks, Angels. Great diverse community, middle class, hardworking Americans, all looking for the American dream. And my job is to give them the opportunity to buy a home.
And the best bubble tea.
Yes.
Great bubble tea in Anaheim. Congressman Correa, Congressman Alford, thank you so much
Thank you.
for being
This is
here. Really
great.
appreciate it. Yeah, come back. We will
I'd
have
love
you
to.
on again.
Invite us back.
Hopefully there'll be another update on housing or another issue you guys are working on together. And thank you guys for watching. We'll be right back. We're going to have Vermont Senator Peter Welch on his plans to reform FEMA. And later on, Congresswoman Kat Kamak on tackling congressional sexual misconduct. It's 5:35. We'll be back in a minute.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
A simple blood test can detect Alzheimer's years before symptoms appear. Congress can connect Americans to early, accurate dementia diagnosis by supporting the bipartisan Alzheimer's Screening and Prevention Act, allowing Medicare to cover blood-based Alzheimer's screening. Congress has acted to cover mammograms and other life-saving screenings. Now it can redefine Alzheimer's care, unlocking early detection and access to FDA-approved treatments when they work best. Congress, it's up to you. Paid for by the Alzheimer's Association.
Welcome back to the 535. I'm Brody Mullins. Exciting day in housing we have for us. Shannon McGann, Executive Vice President, Chief Advocacy Officer of the National Association of Realtors. Tell us about what happened yesterday. Super exciting day.
Well, first off, thank you, Brody, for having me today, and congratulations on your new venture. We are very excited for 535 News, and this is a big week for housing, and it's been a big year for housing. We've all heard affordability is one of the top issues that Americans are dealing with day in and day out. And at the National Association of Realtors, we've been focused on housing affordability, availability, and accessibility for several years, working to make sure that we can come to a bipartisan, bicameral consensus on common sense housing reforms that will unlock inventory, provide more houses for more people to go out and get them at better rates. And this week in the House of Representatives, we see a massive bill that almost had 400 votes for support. I think it was 396. Going over, the president already endorsed it, said this is something that he wants to see the Senate take action on. The Senate has already taken bipartisan action on their own bill, and so we have full faith that the House and Senate will come to an agreement and get something over the finish line soon.
You know, it's so fascinating. It makes me think Donald Trump takes up all the attention in Washington. People think that Congress isn't doing anything. And they think that Congress is nothing but Republicans fighting against Democrats and vice versa. Here we have a bill that passed 396 to 13. So that means nothing better to show a bipartisan majority than that one. We've got a fight coming up with the Senate. So take us through, what did the Senate bill do, what does the House bill do, and how do we put these things together?
Oh, well, these have been years in the works, and as soon as President Trump came into office, some of the first executive orders that he issued and the actions coming out of HUD and others were related to addressing the housing affordability crisis. And it is a crisis. We just had research showing that for the first time in the decades of looking at the average first-time homebuyer, that the average first-time homebuyer is now 40 years old. Compare that to not too long ago when it was 30 years old, and you're seeing about $100,000 or more of equity that's just being left on the table by working families around the country. So for the House and Senate to both understand that and look at where are the problems that the federal government can address. Most of that is in encouraging states and localities to address zoning restrictions and burdensome regulations and transfers and other areas that are impacting private property rights, and that's addressed in this bill. Also looking at things like improvements in manufactured housing and modular housing, and ensuring that folks in areas where it can be more restrictive or difficult to build, that they have access to affordable housing, and that programs at the federal government for many years has promoted to enhance financing and make housing more available are included in manufactured and modular housing. Also looking at things like modernizing these programs. Decades long, we've had many of these that are working, but they're not as competitive as they once were. How do we make sure that localities have access to funds to not just change these zoning restrictions, but also to encourage more building? We have done research for years showing that we are millions of units short of a healthy real estate economy. And when you have that lack of inventory and a high interest rate and a high inflation environment, you have a lack of housing accessibility and affordability.
So let's go back to this bill and the action yesterday. There was a little bit of a drama with the president. The president, in his State of the Union, said he wanted to ban big Wall Street firms from purchasing single-family homes. The Senate, I believe, did not include that language. The House did. What happened?
Brody, drama's your word, not mine, but there's no drama when it comes to housing legislation here. So institutional investors is something that's been discussed for years, especially after the financial crisis, when you've seen hundreds of thousands of units that have been purchased by corporate or institutional investors. We hear from realtors all over the country that there are particular markets where that is much more prominent than others, but the reality is that it's dwindling, and right now it's less than 2% of home sales are going to those institutional investors. However, those are still homes that the president and many others are concerned aren't going to owner occupants. We have done research and proposed policies on this to try to incentivize institutional investors to be able to sell to owner occupants, not only for these future sales to not have their own incentive to purchase them for rent, but also just to make sure that they can offload decade plus of housing inventory that has been purchased. But there are regulatory burdens to that too. It's not just through the ban. So we've had many very helpful conversations with all of the parties involved. What the Senate passed is a ban on those future purchases, but also restrictions on build to rent. So if you are building, that you have to within 7 years be able to sell to an owner occupant. The House rolled some of that back, and the president was still pleased to see that his directive that be included in there was met, and so that's why it's going back to the Senate.
So the president, in his statement of administration policy and his endorsement of the House bill just before it passed yesterday, praised the House for including that provision we just discussed. He said it would address the Wall Street's dominance in the single-family home business marketplace and protect Main Street buyers. So this really seems like a big priority of his. It's also interesting that we've got a Republican in the White House, Republicans control the House, Republicans control the Senate, but a big player here is Elizabeth Warren. What is her role?
Oh, she has been at the table for all of these conversations. This has been a four corners agreement with the chairs and ranking members of financial services and Senate banking, all coming together to show that housing can be done in a bipartisan way, and there are plenty of avenues to move. So I've had the pleasure of working with all of these leaders over many, many years of working in the housing space, and I'm not surprised to see that they all came together. Now, the devil's in the details and making sure that provisions that have changed from the Senate version to the House version and now back to the Senate, the ping pong effect, if you will, that those are still going to be negotiated. But it's also important to note that the White House is a key player in this. Yes, the House and Senate passed the legislation, but it's not going anywhere if the White House doesn't support it. So those conversations are happening hourly as we move forward with this, and we have realtors all over the country who are going to be reaching out to their policymakers and making sure that this and many other housing bills that we're working on are getting the attention and the movement that they deserve.
So let's talk about housing and affordability more broadly, it's separate from the bill. We've all heard of NIMBY. What is YIMBY? This is the latest movement.
The opposite of NIMBY. So they're not in my backyard versus the yes in my backyard. And many of these principles are coming from the YIMBY movement, which is how do you ensure that we're not blocking development in areas where density may be needed, may be wanted. Many folks enjoy living in more high density environments, and how do you ensure that those avenues are still open? And so we work not just with the federal government, but with state and local governments across the country to look at the best practices and what practical solutions are there to ensure that you're unleashing existing inventory and that you're able to develop that new inventory. The Housing Supply Accelerator Playbook is something that we helped develop with the National League of Cities and the mortgage bankers and the American Planning Association to make sure that that number of units can go up so that the price of housing can come down.
It's amazing. I read Ezra Klein's book last year, Abundance, which was partially about this, and one of his conclusions, at least in the first chapter, was The solution to the lack of affordable housing in America is just to build more houses. It's not that difficult, and we're builders. America is builders. We can do this. We've got all these rules and regulations that prevent us from
well, look at post-World War II and in areas where there is a priority to build, it can be done and it can be done quickly, but the problem has been burdensome regulations. Right now, according to the National Association of Home Builders, it costs about $100,000 just before the shovel even hits the ground to build a new home, and when you're looking at multifamily, it's much more. So we also have to look at the tax size and make sure that regulations and taxes aren't preventing that type of development. We have access to existing inventory right now of folks who have been locked in their homes because they can't downsize, they can't sell without paying a capital gains tax. That is another huge issue that Congress has come together in a bipartisan, bicameral way to address, and we are pushing for that to be taken up soon.
Well, let's talk about taxes. Capital gains taxes are a big part of the housing purchase decision that people make. There's been an exemption for a certain amount of capital gains tax when you sell a home that you've lived in for a certain amount of time beforehand. You're trying to increase that. Tell us about your effort on capital gains tax.
Brody, I know you're too young to remember the 1900s, but in 1997, Congress set this exemption, which was $250,000 of home equity for a single filer and $500,000 of equity for a married couple filing jointly, that you would not have to pay capital gains on that. Houses did not cost what they do now in 1997. I don't even want to go into that. This is a point of contention on the internet with how cheap things were in the 1990s. But right now, the average median home price is over $400,000. Where it's really impacting folks are people who are older and may want to downsize, and they have that type of equity in their home. That may be their savings account. That may be what they are banking on for their retirement, but if they go to sell, they're going to pay a capital gains tax, and if they instead decide to heir it or will it to their heirs, then they're step up in basis and they won't pay the same tax. So it's creating this lock-in effect where folks are saying, I would rather just stay in this house and not worry about the tax and then have my heirs deal with it later. And some people think this is only reaching a handful of folks, so we did the research on it. And right now, roughly a third of all homes that could be available on the market would be subjected to that tax. And in 10 years, we're looking at 70% of homes. It never intended to impact these homeowners, and it's something that we have over 110 co-sponsors on in the House, Democrats and Republicans, led by Jimmy Panetta and Mike Kelly in the House. And we also have a Senate companion now, and we're working to make sure that this is something that could be considered as part of the next reconciliation package, or also even as a standalone, or something that maybe the Treasury Department could address.
Shannon McGann from the National Association of Realtors, thank you so much for joining us. Come back anytime. I'm Brody Mullins. We'll be right back on 535.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
I enlisted as a medic to be there to help my patients, and after an injury, I found myself as a patient. I experienced post-traumatic seizures. Depression is a big one that comes along with it, PTSD. So I pursued my PhD in neuroscience and regenerative medicine. The coalition has helped fund my academic pursuits. They genuinely care about helping the vet in whatever way that they can. Through supporting the coalition, you're supporting some of the veterans that have the biggest needs.
Visit saluteheroes.org to learn more.
Welcome back to 535. I'm Mariana Sotomayor, congressional correspondent at Puck. So in the last couple of weeks, I would say a couple of months, you've heard some chatter about prediction markets, just what lawmakers could be doing on insider trading, which is a totally different subject, but all of a sudden, it's kind of become the topic of conversation here on Capitol Hill. So many different lawmakers introducing bills, again, meeting in a bipartisan setting. And one duo is Congressman Adrian Smith, Republican from Nebraska, and Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski, Democrat from Illinois. The Congresswoman is joining me now.
Great
Thank you for being on. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So give our viewers a debrief on what exactly this bill is, because again, I feel like everyone's introducing their own piece of the pie.
Yeah.
It's a big issue to talk about.
It is a big issue, and at home I think this is a common sense piece of legislation that I think people at home are like, of course you should be doing this and passing this. What it would basically do is say, for people like myself as a member of Congress who has access to sensitive policy information, we shouldn't be able to then turn around and monetize that and make a profit on that information through our public service on the prediction markets. I'm really proud that the bill that we have, the PREDICT Act, is the only bipartisan bill in the House. Right now, you mentioned my friend Congressman Adrian Smith is doing this bill with me. That I think, again, I think this should garner, we've been growing in bipartisan co-sponsors right now. I think we're up to 28 different Republican and Democrats to join this bill. But what it would do is to say that we shouldn't be able to, as elected officials, our dependents, so our spouses as well, or even our senior staff. I mean, senior staff also have access to some of that sensitive policy information. We shouldn't be able to turn around on prediction markets and make a profit. It's an insider trading type of thing that I think could really get to, we want to rebuild public trust. I think this is a step forward in that direction. And I think it's common sense, like I said, when the Trump administration came in and took Maduro and went into Venezuela, this is when the issue really came front and center for me, I would say, because we knew that a few very small select number of bidders on the prediction markets, on Polymarket, actually made up to $1 million with a very precise amount of information to make that bet. And so that's what kind of initially got both Adrian and I's attention to introduce this bill. But again, something I hope we can take action on in the House.
Yeah, you referenced this. I know 60 Minutes recently reported that 9 Polymarket accounts have made more than $2.4 million betting on U.S. military actions. With a 98% rate. I mean, how does your bill address a situation like that specifically?
Well, basically what it would say, it would forbid those if we actually were able to prove that those were people within elected office or people within the government at senior levels that had that information that then turned around and monetized it. Our bill is the most comprehensive in providing safeguards. So you would have to pay back if it was actually proven that you did place that bet. You'd have to pay back, and then the money that you made, and then a little bit of a fee on top of that for placing the bet. So a little bit of a penalty. But we would have an apparatus that would actually be able, through the ethics committee, actually look into it, investigate it, hold those people accountable for doing it, and then there'd be a financial penalty to them if it was proven that they did take advantage of the market.
So it's interesting you mentioned that it has to go through the ethics committee. Obviously the ethics committee is constantly reviewing, investigating. It's very rare that they put out statements, right? Sometimes they become the center of attention, as we've seen in recent weeks for other matters. But does that mean you kind of have to rely on a tipster, a source, a leak to say, hey, ethics committee, I know that this, whether it's a staffer, a lawmaker, or who's to say a lawmaker's kid who was just overhearing a conversation when the parent was at home? Like, is that what it would take to be able to investigate?
I think it would take something, an incident like the one that you just mentioned that's highly suspicious, where people made $2.4 million, a very precise bet on, again, something related to war or military action. It raises suspicion, and just applying common sense to that would say, maybe this is something that we need to refer to ethics, have them look into. And that's how the ethics committee, again, a bipartisan committee looks into these types of issues, and we just want to make sure that they have the purview and the ability to enforce. And so that's what our bill would do, and that's why I'd say our bill is the most comprehensive. There was some legislation that came out of the Senate. Senator Padilla actually led some legislation, which is, I think, a really positive step forward, and I think indicates in the House side the PREDICT Act should then be called next. But even our bill is more specific in making specific referrals around the ethics committee, enforcement, penalties, and that's why I think we have the best bill that's being put forward.
Yeah, so Polymarket and Kalshi, so because there's just so much conversation up here about this now, they are trying to just strengthen their policies to try and prevent or restrict any insider trading. I mean, do you trust them to actually be able to do that?
Well, we've met with industry, and one of the things I'd say I'm really proud of is Kalshi has actually endorsed the bill that we've put forward. Actually, Kalshi is voluntarily actually abiding by those guidelines of not saying that elected officials and those in public office shouldn't be utilizing prediction markets. If you want to take a bet on like the Final Four or something sports, that's totally different. I still believe you should be able to do that as an elected official. This is just specifically related to public policy. So Kalshi's already actually done this. They support our bill. And we've met with kind of the broader collaborative in the prediction market space, and they too have indicated support. I think it's positive whenever industry wants to come forward and do right by consumers. So yes, I celebrate that, but I think putting it into law and making sure that consumers have those safeguards and know that we're addressing, again, at a time when Congress is facing all-time record low approval ratings when it relates to public trust. Yeah. This is just one thing we can be doing in Congress to help to rebuild that, put it into law, and make sure that industry is following it.
Yeah, you talk about public trust. So like the approval rating for Congress has been low for a long time. It continues to be. But like you mentioned, this bill has a whole number of co-sponsors, from truly the most conservative to the most liberal here on the House side. Yep. What is the path forward? Like, do you actually think that this could get onto the floor?
I do. I really do. We've actually sent a letter to the Speaker, you know, urging him to take action. This is the time when we've seen the Senate actually take action on this issue. The House should do the same thing. I think Representative Smith and I's bill is the perfect vehicle for that because, to your point, we have a broad array of co-sponsors on both the Republican Conference and the House Democratic Caucus on our bill. So I think now is the time. And I would say too, for me, this is one tool. I think getting at a broader issue around corruption, I've signed on to legislation to ban stock trading for members. I believe in the fact that we need a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. That's speaking for myself. I think there are things that we can be doing in addition to addressing these conflicts with prediction markets that I think will help rebuild public trust. But a really good first step would be this bipartisan bill.
Are there any discussions yet on, you know, if this doesn't get onto the floor, discharge petition? Because that seems to be one way to force leadership to hold some votes on these bipartisan men.
Yeah, discharge petition, that is definitely this congressman, the modus operandi of like how to force a issue. I do think this is common sense. I think if you probably pulled this in any district, you would see broad support for this issue. So I think as we continue to build and add co-sponsors, that should be on the table. But I think our hope is that leadership will take a look at this common sense measure. This isn't a Democrat or Republican issue. This is about, again, the public trust, creating more transparency for taxpayers, and a common sense initiative that I think should happen.
Yeah, corruption is one of the biggest planks, I would say, and something that's very personal to Leader Jeffries, that if you all take back the majority, there's a lot that can happen in that space.
Yeah.
Are you talking to him, or have you pitched him pretty well and saying, hey, if this isn't passed this year, we got to make it a priority in the next Congress?
Yes, we definitely have. We've been in touch with leadership staff about making sure that as the leader is looking at what is our agenda around corruption, rooting that out. I think that the PREDICT Act is just a perfect bill to fit into, again, I think a whole suite of different issues that some of them I mentioned that I think they might be considering. I think tackling the issues around prediction markets is just a common sense thing to add into that agenda. Yeah.
Well, Congresswoman, we only have a couple minutes,
which
is perfect for our 5:35 1 minute.
Great.
So I like to say it's not a magic minute, sorry. You don't have the leadership power yet. But here's some rapid fire questions. What is the best and also the worst part about being in the House of Representatives?
Oh, the best part, I would say, honestly, is my colleagues. Like, I love it's just like a vibe on the House floor and getting to talk to so many people with so many different backgrounds. You meet people from all across the country, and I tend to be a more bipartisan member, so I work with Democrats and Republicans, and so getting to kind of meet people from all walks of life is really a very unique experience you get as a House member. I would say the thing that is like the most challenging is our schedule. You know, we
Yeah.
were just talking
Fair.
before we went on air, am I going to be here on Friday or am I going to be here on Saturday? The unpredictability of it and how to plan for that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people at home don't understand as much that like back and forth and how
Yes.
much we're here and how much we're all eager to get back home. So the schedule is probably the trickiest thing to navigate.
Yeah.
But a lot of my colleagues are, you know, on a day-to-day basis what makes it fun.
Got it. Yeah, I think all of us on the Hill in this ecosystem are always wondering what the schedule is.
Yeah, I'm sure you're living and
even
die
friends
by it
back
too.
home are
Yeah.
like, wait, are you going to make it this weekend? I'm like,
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
What is the best food in your district? Where can we find it?
You know, I guess I would say I love this place called Cafe Moxo, and I would highlight them because they had a business downtown Springfield that burned down. There was a fire in downtown Springfield that really hurt our downtown community. They actually reopened. They have some of the best cookies. They have the best Rice Krispie treats. I know that's not like a,
that's awesome.
a secret sauce to a great Rice Krispie treat, but they've got it if there is one. And they make homemade soups. I mean, they're always busy during lunch. I always go there when I'm home.
Yeah.
Love them.
Okay, so what is your favorite phrase uttered nowhere else but here in the Capitol?
I would say I'll say my favorite phrase that I use a lot is "Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good," and I hear that from other members.
Yeah.
That is really truly something that, as a legislator, I like to embody, which is I want to get things done for my constituents, and I think learning about the legislative process as I have since this is my 4th year, is that very infrequently are you going to find a bill on the House floor that is perfect, that scratches every itch you want. But if it moves the ball forward for our communities, I think that's really important. And I work with a lot of legislators that also use that phrase. And so I'd say don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good is what I like.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
You're
This
welcome.
is a really great conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. We'll be right back.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
National Association of Realtors Advocacy, working to expand access to housing and defend property rights so that more Americans can build generational wealth and prosperity through home ownership, a critical voice in nearly 1/5 of the U.S. economy, supporting 2 jobs for every single-family home sold, and generating more than $760 billion of property tax revenue for state and local governments each year. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors.
I work hard. My dad worked hard. That's where I got it from. What I take home is my future and my kids' future. And if I can invest in companies, they're going to reflect my principles, what I believe in. So why would those companies hire outside people to tell them to embrace principles I don't believe in? Congress must protect the financial future of Americans from the foreign-owned duopoly that answers to no one.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rome. I've played many roles on TV and film, but today I want to speak to you as myself about a cause that's very dear to my heart. The Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund provides free help to those who have cancer and those who wish to prevent it. They've also worked tirelessly on banning cancer-causing chemicals in our homes and neighborhoods. I want to thank them as a mom for protecting our families. Please donate today at the Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund at stopcancerfund.com.
Who is the hardest lawmaker to track down to get in front of?
My Democratic colleagues will say Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, not because she is so in demand, which I think she is, but because she doesn't take meetings with lobbyists.
What about for the beer industry?
Beer is a bipartisan, nonpartisan issue, and generally speaking, members like to get together over a cold beer. I wish they would do it a little bit more, so we're working on that.
Well, thanks for joining us on 535.
Welcome back. I'm Leanne Caldwell. It's 5:35. This is our first Off the Floor series. We're asking members what they do, things that they do that have nothing to do with Congress, but we're also going to talk a lot about what the congressman really does when he's on Capitol Hill and the issues he cares about. I'm joined right now by Congressman Mark Pocan of Wisconsin. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So we'll just start with the thing that you do outside of the Hill. magic.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Since I was a kid, 8 years old, I was doing magic tricks that paid for college, largely
No
doing
way.
magic shows. Yeah. In fact, when I was 14, I won a junior magician contest in Wisconsin that took me to the Midwest. And at 14, I took third place against all these high school kids and everything. And so somehow I went wayward into this career. But I love doing it. We've done over 100 Magic Monday videos. We talk about Washington with a magic trick. That's all on YouTube. And
so what's an example? So what was one of your favorite episodes? Like, how did you connect magic to Washington?
Often a tax thing. One time tearing up a card and then having it kind of restored, but not all of it because of some tax bill that I think the Republicans were doing, showing that they were taking away from the average person to give to rich people.
Oh my gosh.
That was a good one. But it's really kind of the behind the scenes. The worst people to do magic tricks are members of Congress.
Why?
Because they're also used to giving orders. So when you tell them to do something, sometimes it's different than they think, they don't follow. We had one that we could never tape. It took a half hour because they were supposed to take half the cards face up, half the cards face down and shuffle them together. And somehow that concept they could not understand.
Who is that?
I can't say. One is still here, one is not.
Oh
That's all I'll say. But
they can't follow directions.
No, because they're busy giving them. So yeah, it was interesting. But
now do you have better appreciation for like Speaker Johnson or Leader Jeffries for having to try to get members of Congress to listen?
Yeah, trust me, Hakeem came in my class. I can just imagine when we get the majority what it's going to be like for him. But and also I do fundraisers for some of my colleagues. So in fact, June 1st, I'm going to up to New Haven doing an event for Rosa DeLauro. I've done stuff for Barbara Lee when she was around. I did during COVID, a bunch of virtual 3 trick sets on virtual fundraisers. So I still keep active with it, but this day gig gets in my way.
Kind of gets in the way. So how did you, were you gifted a magic kit as a kid? Is that how you got into it?
I went to the public library and I checked out a bunch of books from 793.8, which shows how geeky. That's the Dewey Decimal System code for magic.
And you remember that? Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I have over 1,500 magic books at home. I love books, so I'm always getting new ones. Someday when I retire, I'm going to have time to read them all, but right now I'm picking them up. But
oh my gosh, I wish you had pictures.
Oh, it's a lot. But they saw me checking out books all the time, so they asked me to do a magic show. And at the time, I had a head full of hair, and I was this little kid with a cape, 10 years old, doing. There's pictures in the paper doing, magic shows. They would pay me 2 50-cent McDonald's certificates.
Wow.
So I worked cheap. They liked that, and.
I mean, what else does a 10-year-old need?
Right, exactly.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
I can't believe they paid you.
I know. Well, then I got booked by a lot of other libraries in the area because I worked for $1.
Oh my gosh, did you do birthday parties?
Oh, I did birthday parties. I did big shows like Local 72 back home was UAW Local 72 built cars. Used to be American Motors Company. Probably 1,000 people in the room, and I remember at high school I got a standing ovation, which I still remember because it was like, here you are, high school, 1,000 people, and
that's incredible.
Yeah, at a Christmas party, but I used to keep very busy doing that. I had a van, the Magic van, that had a giant playing card, either a jack or a king. I'm forgetting giant card, pulling out a rabbit out of a hat on one side, and all this stuff. So I was very into
your specialty?
Anything. I mean, these days, honestly, a lot. I do try to relate to Washington. So this is a little story of that's true with magic. I wanted to get on appropriations, which I now serve on. Yeah. And I knew Nancy Pelosi at the time was the leader. We had a progressive caucus dinner. I knew she was going to be there, and I was doing a little mini magic show. So I purposely did a magic trick that made you look really good at math, because I wanted her to think I was really good with numbers and math. And I can't say that it worked, but I am on appropriations.
You can't connect it directly,
no.
But did you get on approps the next Congress? Or the
I did pretty close, right after. So yeah,
she was impressed.
Yeah.
Oh, did you ever ask her about it?
No. But I do tell the story to a few people because it's kind of fun.
And all of us.
Yeah, and everyone else.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So, who are some of your biggest fans?
Or who do I?
do you have kind of repeat customers? Like, who are the people on the Hill or outside who, like, in your district who love your
This
magic?
is funny. So Jonathan Jackson has had me teach him some card tricks, and he said he needs a refresher because he wants to learn. He was actually taking some lessons in Chicago, he said, to do magic tricks. Yeah. Jamie Raskin loves magic, and at one of the Democratic Issues retreats, he and Melanie Stansbury were both doing card stuff. Robert Adderholt on the Republican side really likes magic, and the first time I got on the Propes, I was on the agriculture. When you're from the Midwest, egg sounds like egg, but agriculture subcommittee.
The Wisconsin accent.
Yes. He and I had breakfast, and we thought it was going to be a half hour, hour and 40 minutes later, we broke apart. But it turned out he used to like magic, so he and I talk about it every now and then. And
have you created a magic caucus?
We almost could. You know, there's someone running right now in New York State that if they get elected, they wrote a magic book when they were 15, and now they're like in the state legislature. But if they do, we almost have to.
I think you have to.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, is it a Republican or Democrat?
A Democrat.
Oh wow, who is it?
Michael Lasher in Nadler's district.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. So what sort of magic was done on Approps lately? How's the Approps process looking these days?
You know, in a way I call it fantasy Congress, right? We're going through the motions, but a lot of these bills are probably not going to see the light of day, at least in the House version, because we have a tendency to, in order to get them across the finish line with their narrow margin, we have to put a lot of crazy stuff for their crazy members, and they have more than a few. So because of that, you know, the Senate bill seems to be a little closer to reality. I know some of the Republicans on the committee are telling people that's likely we're going to have a CR this year, a continuing resolution.
They're already admitting that.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, yeah, a lot of them are. So given that, you know, in some ways you're going through the motions, what I'm looking forward to is, you know, hopefully making appropriations back to what it used to be when we get the majority in November. I love Rosa DeLauro. She's one of my favorite members. I shouldn't say that because now I'm picking favorites, but you know, she's just amazing. And one of the things that I think she wants to do is get us back to the way we used to do oversight, like under Dave Obey back in the day. I don't think I've seen it in my last 15 years, but the committee should and does have oversight responsibilities. We should be using them more. And you know, oversight and government reform does oversight, but they do it in a way that's a little bit more performative, and then they all run on TV to say they poked their colleague. I would rather do it in a more analytical way by looking at the finances. I think DOGE cost us money, didn't save us money. It would be great to bring some of those folks in. I think Russ Vought, you know, has broken many laws that we haven't done for 250 years in this country by stealing funds that Congress has appropriated. I think we should have that conversation. I think there's a lot we can do to make appropriations great again, I guess I refer to, my own MAGA.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of, I think, what Rosa would love to do as well.
Oh, that's really fascinating. Is there buy-in from leadership on that and from other Democrats on the Approps Committee?
Rosa is the best, yes.
Yeah.
And she totally wants to restore that. I think the other thing is the Senate gets so many more community-directed spending authorizations than House members do, and I think we need to adjust that because at minimum, let's have self-respect for who we are, right? And there should be some parity between the House and the Senate. But again, if there's no one better,
earmarks for everyone who.
Yes, earmarks.
Change the name. Just go back to earmarks.
I know. It would be much easier.
I know.
But you know, Rosa's probably the best suited person, given her vast experience on that committee, to do all this. So hopefully, we'll be able to then, you know, have a more respected Congress again, but actually do our jobs in a way that actually aren't just performative.
Yeah, well, as far as Approps is concerned, you have an amendment, I believe it is, regarding the president's $1.5 trillion spending request for the defense budget.
Yeah.
Talk about that, or reining that back in. Tell me what your idea is for that.
So about 6 or so years ago, Barbara Lee and I formed a defense spending reduction caucus to try to, at the time, I think we were around, give or take, $650 billion in expenditure on defense, much of that going to contractors, not our service members. And we wanted to hold the line on that because every dollar that goes there doesn't go to education or housing or healthcare. Well, now we're at $1 trillion, and the request is for $1.5 trillion. And when you do that, it's not like new dollars magically appear. Instead, it's going to come from those other priorities that people in my district really need and in other people's districts. So when you see what Donald Trump's doing, especially with a war of choice where we're wasting literally $50 billion, $1 billion or $2 a day on a war of choice that's completely misguided, we need to speak out against that, because unfortunately, I think defense budget has become a jobs program. Everyone's got to imprint in their districts. You kind of go, oh yeah, that helps create jobs. But we should have fiscal accountability. I mean, I sound like a Republican when I say that, but we really need to have fiscal responsibility, and they never do. They've failed 8 audits in a row. We would not let any other agency do that. They can only account for about 55% of their equipment, which is ridiculous given how much money they have. That comes out of the audits.
Yeah.
And yet we all kind of go, okay, here, have another $500 billion additional in your budget. So it's one that if people really looked at objectively, I think we all would be looking at it with a more serious eye. Instead, people are like, well, there's a footprint back home, therefore, and it just kind of gets away with spending too much when I would much rather have money go to our service members than to defense contractors. Instead of their profits, we could scale some of that back and get it into healthcare and education, housing, and a whole lot more.
Have you all received anything official yet on the $29 billion cost of the war?
No, and they refuse to give us anything. I mean, this is the worst administration ever. I've been doing this for over 30 years, not Congress, but in government. I cannot understand how people just continue to look the other way on the Republican side with this guy. He's the absolute worst. It's all about Donald Trump and his family and how he can enrich themselves. And when it comes to stuff like this, they just think he's above the law. I mean, who'd have ever thought that he would steal money that Congress in a bipartisan way appropriated, and he takes it away and people would just sit back and do nothing, which is why I think people like myself look at Mike Johnson, and yes, he's got a tough job, but also he appears not to have a spine. He's a human jellyfish in some ways, because he won't stand up to the administration. And the fact that the Constitution says we're a co-equal branch of government, and he's choosing to be a subservient branch of government is a disservice to the American people, because you don't have the checks and balances that our founders intended.
There's another funding issue that you have spoken up on recently, and that's the new $1.776 billion fund for slush fund, people who they quote anti-weaponization fund. What should Congress do about that?
Well, first of all, stand up. Again, reach behind your back, and that bumpy thing, it's called a spine. You can use it, right? We don't use that too often. A few people have spoken out, but this is absolutely ridiculous. I saw Mike Lindell, the pillow guy, is saying he's going to sue for $400 million. It's like all these crazy people are going to come out of the woodwork and say that something's been weaponized. And in reality, that's our money, our taxpayer dollars that could go to many other things like healthcare and et cetera. So we're going to introduce a bill that's going to say a 100% taxation rate on whoever gets money out of there. I mean, quite honestly, I don't think it's legal to begin with, and hopefully there'll be a lawsuit that can stop it. But knowing the Trump administration, much like he tore down the East Wing before he had any permission, he'll probably start doling money out. So then hopefully we can try to get this out there to capture it back for the taxpayers.
To wrap up, Congressman, we're going to do something at the 5:35 1 minutes.
Okay.
You already answered one of the questions, which was who is your the smartest member of Congress, and you already said Rosa DeLauro.
Yeah, Rosa's amazing.
So I'm going to ask you another one. If you could fix one thing, you kind of answered this too. What would it be?
No, actually, what I would do, honestly, is campaign finance reform.
Okay.
Without question.
Uh-huh.
There are 15,000 lobbyists in this town. 10% are just big pharma. And you wonder why we pay more for prescription drugs in this country than any other country. But then they fund campaigns. And we watch even right now in primaries, 3 groups, AIPAC, a group that advocates for essentially Netanyahu, crypto and AI have put so much dark money into races. Unless we get rid of Citizens United, unless we get a handle on campaign finance, your own campaign could be the 6th or 7th biggest spender in your own race because of outside groups coming in. At that point, we really are like NASCAR. We should wear patches for who brought us here because we're not actually doing the campaigns like they've always been done, where you reach out to your voters and you get their support and you raise money locally. But campaign finance reform and ending Citizens United, without question, would have the biggest impact on every single issue we've talked about.
Great. Congressman Pocan, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
And we will be right back. And next up, or later in the show, we'll have Senator Peter Welch, who sits down with our Notice congressional reporter, Paul Kane, for a look at how to reform FEMA. We'll be right back.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
He is what your show is called, The Decider.
It's Washington's hottest new show, and it has the Beltway buzzing.
Americans, they know BS when they see BS.
Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Brody Mullins.
Is this era ending and is a new era beginning?
And veteran strategist Lisa Camuso-Miller.
Have you ever had to tell a client no?
Talk to the biggest and most influential players.
We wanted $1 million. He said done.
Rewriting the rules of influence.
Business is going to be on the ballot.
Congress needs to do their job.
They become lapdogs rather than watchdogs.
The people who never talk.
That's such a good question.
Talk to them.
It was kind of fun, actually.
It's Washington's only show by and for insiders.
Welcome to the
Deciders.
Watch weekly right here on 535.
There are moments that shape an organization's future. A policy shift, a crisis or investigation, a market shock. When that moment hits, the clock starts. Markets move in minutes. Regulators, employees, and customers respond instantly. Narrative helps leaders respond with pace, engage stakeholders with precision, and position brands with perspective. So when challenges emerge, you can navigate complexity and lead with clarity before the narrative is defined for.
National Association of Realtors Advocacy, working to expand access to housing and defend property rights, so that more Americans can build generational wealth and prosperity through home ownership, a critical voice in nearly 1/5 of the U.S. economy, supporting 2 jobs for every single-family home sold, and generating more than $760 billion of property tax revenue for state and local governments each year. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors.
America's Vet Dogs is a national nonprofit empowering veterans, first responders, and active duty service members facing both visible and hidden disabilities through the placement of a highly trained service dog. However, recipients never bear the financial burden. You can be a part of making a meaningful difference in the lives of veterans and first responders in need. Learn more by visiting vetdogs.org.
America leads the world in medicine development.
It matters.
We get new medicines first, nearly 3 years faster.
5 million Americans go to work because we make medicines here at home.
And not relying on other countries keeps us safe.
But China is racing to overtake us.
Will we let them?
Or will we choose to stay ahead?
When America leads,
America cures.
Let's tell Washington to keep us in the lead.
You're watching 535.
This is 535.
535.
You're watching 535.
535.
535.
535.
We're live on Capitol Hill, and 535 starts right now.
Welcome back to 535 News. This is Paul Kane of Notice, soon to be The Star. I am joined by a very special guest, Daniel Schuman, the Executive Director of the American Governance Institute. Daniel is an expert on this branch. We're here in the Cannon House office building across the street from the Capitol. He knows the functions of how this place is supposed to work, so much so that he was here till midnight last night at what is always a high-profile markup for viewers of 535, the legislative branch appropriation. So tell us about it. Explain to us, first of all, what is that branch? And explain, how little money there is, but actually how important it is.
So legislative branch, appropriation subcommittee, as you know, there are 12 appropriation subcommittees, and each are headed by the cardinals, which apparently is what passes for humor among appropriators.
It's for old Catholics like I grew up in the family, not for the baseball team, but the College of Cardinals.
That's right.
That elect a pope. The appropriators dubbed themselves the Cardinals many decades ago.
And this is the process by which they determine how much money is going to be spent and on what inside the legislative branch. So some of this decision is made before you get to this point. So there's, I don't know, roughly $2 trillion worth of federal spending that is appropriated. And they take that $2 trillion and they divvy it up among the 12 appropriation subcommittees. Now there's a formal process that they're supposed to follow. They didn't do any of this, so that hasn't happened.
Okay.
But Ledge Branch was, as always, was given the smallest portion of $7 billion, roughly, which is not enough money to run the legislative branch.
Yeah.
And now, please.
Explain now, because part of that is salaries. A lot of people instinctively think, oh, that's what just pays the salaries of lawmakers and their staff. But it's a fairly sprawling group of things, ranging from Capitol Police to the Library of Congress across the street. How many different agencies are sort of within that? How many? Just give a few highlights of them.
Well, it depends on how you count, but the bigger ones, the Library of Congress is quite large. They're about a $900 million a year budget. You have the Capitol Police, which is about $900 million a year. They have about 2,300 sworn officers, another 400 employees. The architect of the Capitol is quite large. They were asking for $1.6 billion this year. They got about 900 million or so. And then you have a bunch of smaller entities, the Congressional Budget Office, the Office of Congressional Workplace Rights. But to put this in context, so Capitol Police, $900 million. The funding for all the personal offices put together in the House of Representatives, which is called the Member Representational Account, that's about $900 million as well. And funding for the House committees is roughly $230 million. So when you look at the legislative branch budget, most of the money is not going towards lawmaking, it's going towards security and infrastructure, buildings and cops, and support staff to make this place work for the visitors, for the members trying to conduct their operations. And just a final point on that, the money for the policy work hasn't really increased in 25 years. Where all of the new money has gone, or almost all of the new money has gone, is to cops and buildings. Capitol Police in the year 2000, adjusted for inflation, were funded about $150 million a year. They asked for $1 billion this year, they got 900. The architect of the Capitol, I don't know what it was in 2000, because they were building I think the end of the visitor center.
Yes, that was going on then.
But they asked for $1.6 billion, up from $800 million last year. And they said in the Senate that they're going to need, I think, $15 billion over the next 20 years, because all of these buildings, which they haven't been maintaining, are in dire straits and need to be fixed.
Yeah, there was a report, my colleagues at Notice had this jaw-dropping report in late March. The Rayburn building, 2 buildings over from here, was in, I can't remember, like, catastrophic distress.
Yes.
Like the building is basically falling to pieces.
Right.
This building, Cannon, has undergone years and years of rehabilitation. I was just in a coffee shop. My colleagues call it the hipster coffee shop.
It's phenomenal.
And all right. Overall, what is the trend line compared to a couple years ago? Just, we're going to go short term here.
Yeah.
Is this up from a couple years ago in terms of how much they're giving to the lawmaking side of things? And how much should they be increasing things, in your mind, if they wanted this place to work effectively?
For policy staff have been cut and cut and cut. For the last 3 years, funding for this work has been paused, essentially, so that they would keep the funding level either at baseline adjusted for inflation or below. And the consequences, this is driving a brain drain, that people are leaving the Hill in droves. There was a 24% turnover rate in the personal offices in the House last year. People are not expert in the way that they used to be here. They don't stay for that long, and they're at the very beginning of their careers.
How does that do? I used to have these numbers at the top of my head. 24% turnover, is that any better than it was 5 years or 10 years ago, or is it actually higher?
It depends on which year you pick. So, but the data suggests that this is among the highest turnover rates that we've seen in the time that we've been able to track this information.
Huh. because some of the salaries have gone up. There was a loosening a few years ago. There was a deal between Democrats and Republicans. Steny Hoyer was the majority leader. He was always pushing for more. So those MRAs that you talk about, the member representational, sort of what you get as a congressman to pay your staff, they loosened that up after it had been cut severely.
But that's a funny story. So in 2010, 2011, the Ledge Branch Appropriations Subcommittee, chaired by Congressman Graves, cut funding for the legislative branch by 10%. So a literal decimation, right? 1 in 10. And it eviscerated the capability of the legislative branch to do its job. And for the ensuing years, they kept the funding down. So I wrote a number of reports starting around the time saying we need to significantly increase funding. In 2019, I'd recommended 20% increase to get us back to parity for the member representational account. And that is what Leader Hoyer and actually Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, in an unusual alliance, pushed for and were able to do. So what we got in 2020 was not better, it was just getting us back to what the 2010 levels were, which themselves were way below what the historical norms have been. So we've never been able to get ahead of this problem. The problem continues to get worse and worse. Sometimes we're able to stave it off for a little while. The Democrats seem to be more willing to invest in staff in certain ways, although there have been some Republicans that have been willing to do this. But we're, again, in this, we need to demonstrate economy to the American people. The way we do that is by doing it at home. Thus, we're going to cut the legislative branch. This goes back to the Gingrich years where we had that same problem. But when you look at funding for the legislative branch, it has grown at half the rate for other non-defense discretionary spending. So that's a mouthful, but what that means is that when you look at all the other non-defense agencies, when they grow by 2%, Ledge Branch grows by 1%. So if you compound that over time, the gap between the money that we give to Congress and all the people that they oversee, it goes up like this, like a hockey stick.
So there's a real irony. You talked about Congressman Graves from Georgia, who was that guy who gave the first big cut. It was the Tea Party Congress, and the real cut was going to be we're going to take it out on ourselves. Flash forward 8 years later, Graves had become a kind of institutionalist, and he was the co-chair of a special committee, the Modernization Committee, in short, that was run by Derek Kilmer of Washington as the Democrat and Graves of Georgia. And one of the things that they were trying to do and made recommendations for out of that evenly divided committee were some of these things of give more money for the MRAs, for staff budgets, plus let people get paid more money. The sad kicker to all of this is Tom Graves, once he became that institutionalist, a few months later announced he was retiring from Congress, and I believe he is now downtown, in a lobbying firm of some sort. And that's the point when you talk about that turnover. A lot of people instinctively say, "Oh, who cares? They're just terrible staff." What happens is they leave here, and where do they go work?
K Street.
They go to K Street, and then who replaces them? You're the military legislative assistant, and you've gone downtown to work for Boeing. The 23-year-old who doesn't know anything about military affairs gets promoted. Who does that 23-year-old then go to for advice about how to do his job?
Of course, the lobbyists that are coming into their office, as always.
Probably the lobbyist who just left, who's who wasn't even making enough money to be under the cooling off period that you're supposed to do. And so all of a sudden this office is now essentially having military policy being run by its former staffer who works for Boeing or someone else.
When I was a staffer a million years ago, I remember a lobbyist coming to the office and his shoes cost more than what I earned that month. And that was just what it was.
Okay. I have been on this kick, you have been on this kick. Members themselves have been so politically afraid to talk about raising their own pay. 2009 was the last time that they allowed the cost of living adjustment. There are a bunch of former members who have filed a lawsuit. There was a ruling last night. A ruling is too strong, but a judge in this case is basically saying that these former members are right, isn't essentially, right? Can you
That's
explain
right.
it?
So a federal claims court judge, it's a case brought by Rodney Davis, who was the former chair of the House Administration Committee, they claim that they were basically entitled to back pay. So it's a little weedy, but in the late 80s, there was legislation that said that members couldn't earn outside pay. They couldn't receive honoraria and a number of other things. And in return for that, in a one-time pay bump, that their salary would be adjusted to basically keep pace with inflation. It could never be more than a 5% increase, and it would be basically the equivalent, a little bit less than what other federal employees got. And that was the plan to depoliticize, and they did it for members of Congress, they did it for federal judges, and they did it for others as well. But what happened is, of course, politics intruded. Only a couple years into that process, there was an effort to use the appropriations process to basically pause this increase. And I think there have been 23 or 24 pauses over, since 1993 or 1994. And the result is, if you look at 2009 pay, so members of Congress currently earn $174,000 a year. If they hadn't had their pay frozen, they would be currently earning $270,000 a year. So it's a $100,000 difference. And what Rodney Davis has sued for with other members is basically their back pay, their retirement benefits, and there's a third thing that I don't remember, some other calculation about their pension.
Yeah. And the judge seems to have said that what they are stating is true, that they did this denial of the pay violated the 27th Amendment. This is the second straight week I've referenced the 27th Amendment. I love it. And that now I think they're into a period where they're figuring out the cost. Real quick, how long do we know before the judge is going to say, all right, there's this much pay coming?
We don't know. They're going to have to figure it out. There are still other legal questions that need to be addressed, as well as factual questions. So what we had yesterday was summary judgment. Right? So the court said four things. At least I shouldn't say four things, because if I don't remember, I'll fall. But the four things should be that the 27th Amendment applies to variations in pay. So if you increase it or if you decrease it, that the 27th Amendment applies.
All right, we're going to have to pause there.
Okay.
We'll come back.
Yes,
when we
of
get a
course.
final ruling on this, we're going to have you back. All right, everybody, we're going to take a break, and we will be right back to 535. You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
There are moments that shape an organization's future. A policy shift, a crisis or investigation, a market shock. When that moment hits, the clock starts. Markets move in minutes. Regulators, employees, and customers respond instantly. Narrative helps leaders respond with pace, engage stakeholders with precision, and position brands with perspective. So when challenges emerge, you can navigate complexity and lead with clarity before the narrative is defined for you.
We are Lions International, one association of global volunteers, one foundation for humanitarian grants, shaping the future, one act of kindness at a time. We are on a mission to improve health and well-being, to strengthen communities, to serve a world in need. We are Lions International.
To learn more, visit lionsclubs.org.
America's Vet Dogs is a national nonprofit empowering veterans, first responders, and active duty service members facing both visible and hidden disabilities through the placement of a highly trained service dog. However, recipients never bear the financial burden. You can be a part of making a meaningful difference in the lives of veterans and first responders in need. Learn more by visiting vetdogs.org.
Welcome back. So you may have noticed that the price of gas is pretty high. The president, who many are blaming for that happening, has suggested and might want to implement suspending the gas tax. That, of course, has been a topic of conversation up here on Capitol Hill. Many saying there's pros and cons to that, simply because Congress actually is the only one who can suspend a gas tax. For For those who may not realize what the gas tax essentially is, for gasoline it's 18 cents, for diesel it's 24 cents, and all of that kind of goes to federal projects and highways. So someone who is for it is Democrat from California, Congressman Josh Hardin. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about this, because it's rare for Democrats to agree with Trump, but there is a constituency here when it comes to the gas tax who are for suspending it.
Yeah.
How come? What's your proposal?
The gas tax is long overdue to be reformed. Gas prices have been stratospheric for years. Now they're even worse because of the war in Iran. But if we can suspend the state and federal gas tax, we can take $1 per gallon off of the price of every single gallon sold across the country. That's a huge deal for supercommuters that are driving 4 or 5 hours a day. I have 100,000 folks doing that in my community. And the crux of the issue is two things. One is the current price is just unaffordable for any American. But two, it's a deeply unfair tax. 98% of the cars in a district like mine are gas powered, whereas in some parts of the country, it's 50, 60% of new cars are electric vehicles. They're not paying any gas tax at all, but they're driving on the same roads. We have to fix this system so everybody can pay their fair share.
So what you're proposing is just a suspension, at least to the end of the year.
Yeah.
Why that time slot?
I think we need an emergency solution to just how bad gas prices have become, but that cannot be the only arrow in our quiver. We also have to make sure we're building more energy, and then we have to reform the entire way that we finance our highways and roads. We need more money for infrastructure, but that cost should be borne by every vehicle on the road, not by the folks that are, in general, the most vulnerable folks in our community who are driving gas-powered vehicles and are the only people actually paying this tax right now.
You mentioned a number of things that I definitely want to get into, but when we talk about the gas tax, it's not like this is happening all of a sudden, right? I just remember even last Congress, I believe, when appropriators were talking about transportation. The markups for surface transportation bill is happening this week, I believe. There were Republicans who didn't want to see that happen. I believe it was snuck in, I think, last Congress. Feels like we're always talking about appropriations, but it was a problem, and they had to take it out. So how do you bridge that understanding, especially for those of you who are of the coalition of, well, let's suspend the gas tax. Let's talk about doing something different here.
Change is hard, especially at a time when folks feel like we're not investing in our infrastructure enough. And so that's why we can't just do the gas tax fix alone. We also have to make it easier to build infrastructure all across the country. It's gotten way too expensive to actually fix our roads and bridges. There's so much red tape in this system that it can cost 3 or 4 times as long to plan a project as to actually build it. That is just outrageous, and ultimately that cost is being borne by the taxpayers. And so if we want to make sure that we have these taxes go as far as they can, it needs to be fair, it needs to be broad-based, which means we need to reform the gas tax, but also we need to make every single tax dollar go much farther by getting permit reform done and taking the red tape out of the process.
Yeah, I want to get into permitting because that's been an issue I've heard about for so long.
Yeah.
All corners of the Capitol have tried to reform that. But first, I want to read what the Bipartisan Policy Center said about the gas tax. They said, quote, "A suspension would provide modest temporary relief to consumers at the pump, but in doing so would blow another hole in the federal deficit and further strain the user pay, user benefit system of the Highway Trust Fund." What do you make of that?
It can't be the only thing we do.
Right.
And that's why it needs to make sure that the goal here is financing our highways in a way that every single person pays their fair share. If you have Los Altos, California, where almost every car is an electric vehicle, one of the richest areas where folks are living in $10 million mansions, not a single home is paying the gas tax. Whereas if you live in Stockton, California, a couple hours away, every single car on the road is gas powered, they're all paying the gas tax. That's not a fair system, especially when they're on the exact same highway every single day. So the fix is not just to suspend the gas tax, is to make sure that we reform the entire way we finance our infrastructure and make sure that every single car on the road pays the same fair tax.
I want to talk about your home state because notoriously it does have pretty high gas prices. When over here, a lot of people are panicking that it's over $4. You guys are like, great, welcome to
$5, $6,
every
$7
day.
at times.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is that your state has a 71-cent gallon gas tax.
Right.
So your colleague, Kevin Kiley, now an independent, wants to be bridging more than he has before across the aisle. He also has a bill that would punish states that set their taxes above 50 cents. Do you think that approach is also necessary on the state level?
I fully support suspending the state gas tax. I supported it back in 2018 when it was on the ballot across the state of California. The wrong way to fix this is by taking more money away from California at a time when the federal government is already in a war against our state and trying to pull away every single tax dollar that we pay into the system. That's not fair, that's not righteous, and we can't continue to make those mistakes. But the impetus of trying to make sure that we are not just fixing the state gas problem, but also addressing the state taxes, which are just as bad, even worse, is absolutely has to be a core to this message.
Yeah. Let's talk about permitting reform, because as I mentioned, it really is something that I hear from Republicans, Democrats. Doesn't really matter where you are on the ideological spectrum.
Yeah.
It's something that, whether they've realized it or not,
yeah,
has to be addressed, whether it comes to housing or energy costs. And obviously when we're talking about suspending the gas tax, that doesn't necessarily have this effect on energy. So there's a lot of proposals out there. I mean, we almost saw permitting reform happen a couple Congresses ago in a Democratic trifecta. Obviously, the Senate has different opinions in that case in particular. But what is the conversation happening right now? Do you have a certain proposal on this? You, I know, are part of the New Dems, and you guys are very policy focused.
Yeah, we've started an entire group about this called the Build America Caucus, uniting Democrats and Republicans across the ideological spectrum who are united around how do we make it easier and faster to build all types of infrastructure, be that housing, be that roads and bridges, or of course energy, at a time when energy prices are just skyrocketing. Folks in my area are paying twice in their monthly energy bills what they were paying just 10 years ago. And the biggest reason for that is we have not built enough. We've put so much process in the face of actually getting more shovels in the dirt and building the projects that are broadly supported across the country that we are left with less competition and ultimately higher prices. This is a pretty simple issue. We need to make it easier to build more projects. And the best way to do that is to make sure that we are shortcutting the permit time. We can make sure that we are, there's no trade-offs. I think with environmental and labor standards, we can keep those very high, but making sure that this process doesn't go on for years and years. Again, if it's taking you 2 to 3 times as long to permit a project as it takes to build a project, something is deeply out of whack. And then the second real core principle here is we have to get the politics out of this process. We have seen projects that are 98, 99% completed that have been canceled by this administration, not because they don't pencil out, not because they wouldn't lower costs for Americans, but because they're not politically supported by an administration that has a vendetta against especially solar and wind and renewable energy projects. And so if we can actually get the politics out of that process, we can make sure that more projects are making it through based on their merits and not based on whose palm they're actually greasing in Washington.
What you're saying is something I've privately heard from House Republicans, including those in the most vulnerable districts. Yeah. There's obviously a couple of those out in California. I bring that up because, I never say never. Maybe permitting reform, there's something that happens and can pass this Congress, but we're running out of days up here on Capitol.
I tell
you guys
folks
are.
I'm not optimistic, I'm determined.
Yeah,
we have to get this done, and I think probably after the election is going to be an easier window, but I think we're closer than it might appear. There's some strong negotiations going on.
What are you doing behind the scenes? Because it's possible that Democrats get back the majority, right? So you guys could put a permitting reform bill on the floor, maybe multiple.
Yeah,
what are the conversations like
there? Well, look,
there?
I mean, I think it's the same issue that is holding us back on building more housing as holding us back on building more energy. Yesterday, we passed a bipartisan housing bill, 396 to 13. Yep. It was one of the strongest bipartisan votes on any issue of substance so far this year. Every single Democrat in Congress supported it. And that project is going to make it easier to build homes. At a time when the median home buyer is 59 years old across the country, and an entire generation of young people my age, are being priced out of the American dream because they think they're never going to be able to afford a home or be able to live on their own and get off of their parents' sofa. We need to make sure that we are building more homes. That bill is going to go a long way towards to make sure we get that done. So I think that is proof that there is a real coalition here that doesn't just want to argue and yell at folks on cable news all the time, but actually wants to get things done and help the American public.
You're doing a good job segueing me into the next questions that I have prepared. I wanted to ask you about that housing bill. I mean, I knew it was bipartisan, but to your point, I mean, it was basically almost every member of Congress.
Yeah.
I think there was like 20 people who didn't vote, but then there was another 13 more.
396 to 13. I mean, that is pretty incredible margins at this time and place. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, you're the let me get this right, Build America Caucus, you all said that this is a good first step. What more can you all do in this space? Because there is a lot to do on housing.
Yeah.
Again, a bipartisan issue that I hear often from both sides.
First, let's get this bill passed. Sure. I think we need to make sure that it passes the Senate, which I believe it will do. President Trump has said he will sign this into law. We need to build about 10 million homes over the next 10 years. We used to build about 2.2 million homes a year across the country. Now we're closer to 1.3 million. And that's why prices are so high, because it's become so expensive to build a home that a lot of the time it just doesn't pencil out. If you have fewer homes built, you have fewer folks that can actually move out and form a family and live on their own. And that's the situation, especially in states like California, that have seen housing starts just really collapse over the last 2 decades since the financial crisis. We have to fix that issue. There's a lot of ways to do it. We have to fix zoning reform, we have to fix construction costs, we have to fix the financing. There's a lot of tools in our quiver, but this bill is going to be the first time since 1974, over 50 years ago, that Congress has passed a meaningful pro-housing bill. That's a big deal. And if we can get this across the finish line, I think we can prove out not just the good that this bill is going to do, but that there is a coalition of folks that is willing to make sure that we are getting meaningful housing legislation done.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens there, because it is, like you said, it could be pretty much a landmark bill.
Yeah, I think it is probably the only major bipartisan issue that's going to pass potentially this entire Congress.
I think you might be right there. We only have a couple minutes, so I wanted to pepper you with some rapid fire questions.
Sure.
It's 5:35, 1 minute.
Yeah.
What's the best part and the worst part about being in the House of Representatives?
I think the worst part is not going to be surprising. It's being away from your family.
Sure.
I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old.
You have a long commute.
We have a long commute for sure, and it's a lot more fun to be with the family. But every single week that I have to be away from my kids, I tell them what I'm doing. They're starting to understand, especially my 4-year-old is starting to get some of the issues we're working on, so that's a lot of fun. By far the best part is the difference that you can make just showing up in a community that feels neglected or ignored. In a community of 750,000 people like I represent, there are many pockets that have just never seen a member of Congress, even though we're out there every single day and showing up at an elementary school where folks have no idea who I am, what I'm doing, talking to folks about the importance of our democracy. That's a lot of joy and it's a lot of fun, and you don't actually have to pass a bill to do it. You can just show up and have a good time.
So, which is the best committee? Where can you do the most work for your constituents? There's a number of them.
Yeah, I got to say, obviously, the Appropriations Committee, which manages the federal budget. It's hard to have higher leverage than that. But specifically, the Interior Subcommittee, because every single year we have a bird day where we bring in all sorts of birds in our national parks. So you have bald eagles flying around in the committee chamber, which is pretty cool, and all sorts of other exotic wildlife. And it's a good way to make sure that folks actually understand the beauty of our national park system, the beauty of our wildlife coming into DC.
Man, I didn't realize that.
You're welcome to come. Come on out for Bird Day.
Yeah.
It is a real highlight every single year.
Tell me, where's the best place to get food in your district?
It is always the taco truck across the street from wherever you are.
Nice.
And I strongly recommend, I always get lingua, which is cow tongue. It may not sound delicious, but it is absolutely the best thing you can get. A lingua quesadilla with a massive dose of horchata, which is really great. It's cinnamon rice milk, 5 stars, and like the best beer is always the closest one. The best taco is always from the place across the street.
Yeah. Well, Congressman, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I'm sure we will have other conversations on a number of topics.
Anytime.
You guys are getting busy with policy and
We've
agenda
got lots
setting.
to do. That's for sure.
Thank you so much.
No, of course. Thank you.
We'll be right back.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
Congressman Moliner, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Appreciate you having me.
Can you explain to people where your district is and what kind of district it is? What do they grow in your district? And is that a big job industry in your district? Talk to me about this bill you have. It's called the Farms Act. What exactly is the problem you're trying to solve with this? Is this something that the administration could address on their own, or does it need to require Congress to pass a law to really fix it? Is this bipartisan at all? Do you have Democratic support? So what's the brass tacks here? Who's your counterpart in the Senate, and what is the path forward you see for this legislation?
Oh my gosh. Let me think about that.
In Afghanistan, the IED actually penetrated the vehicle between my legs. But it was a miracle that we all survived in the vehicle.
When I began the process to separate from the military, it was during COVID. And with the issues back home, we just knew we got to come back home and take care of the family. So we had to go stay at our mom's house. And there was already 3 people living there and 5 of us, or 8 people. How many bedroom? Like a 2-bedroom. It was like a 2-bedroom house. We were desperate.
So then when we transitioned to Texas, it was very much so like, what are we gonna do now?
When I came home, I needed a new roof due to a storm, and I was about to lose homeowners insurance as well. I applied for Operation Homefront Critical Financial Assistance Program. They've really been a blessing.
I'm in the Permanent Homes for Veterans program. They built a house for me, and it's amazing.
We got the call, this is your house, and the kids and I took off just to go sit in the driveway and cry. It's life-changing. It took us from a hopeless situation, and now we're homeowners. We have a savings account.
The best way to describe Operation Homefront is that it's like a family, because they're always there for you.
I would say you guys are angels behind closed doors.
Operation Homefront has impacted my family in a way that's probably going to be passed down through my family's history. It's definitely going to be a story that's going to be told for generations.
Welcome to 535. I'm Brody Mullins here with Scott Breen, president of the Can Manufacturers Institute. Before we get to Scott, fascinating day on Capitol Hill. The House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee is marking up a bill right now on highway, a big $500 billion highway and surface transportation reauthorization bill. But interestingly, J.D. Vance is now pushing an amendment on that bill to put in new safety regulations on the railroad industry. It's something that almost every Republican is opposed to. Almost every Republican voted this bill down a few years ago, and now it's back. The twist is that last night, Donald Trump put out a social media post saying that he supports it and is encouraging Republicans on the committee to accept this amendment. So this is an amendment that's opposed by most of the Republican Party, opposed by industry, supported by Democrats and labor unions, and being pushed by J.D. Vance, the President of the United States. This morning, Don Jr. came out with a post saying he supported it. So fascinating example of how the political parties are turning upside down right now, which brings us right to our topic today, which is tariffs. So you represent the can manufacturing industry.
Yes.
So tell us about your tariff and how you think it's backfired.
Yes, so there is a tariff right now on what's called tin plate steel. So that's what we use to make steel food cans. So you have this thin layer of steel, it's coated with a thin layer of tin, and U.S. steel can manufacturers, they have to import most of the tin plate that they need to make steel food cans. And so along with importing that tin plate, that they have no other choice but to do so, that 50% tariff is adding cost that then gets passed along in the steel food can value chain that increases the cost for the consumer. So we share the president's goal of more tin plate production in the United States, but we want to try to do it in a way that puts America first across the U.S. steel food can value chain, that doesn't increase costs for consumers at the grocery store, and that doesn't give a cost advantage on foreign filled food cans, which I'd love to talk about.
So let's get to that. That was my next question. So tariffs are supposed to help U.S. manufacturing, U.S. jobs, and hurt foreign competitors. In this case, the opposite has happened. Tell us how this is given a marketplace advantage to foreign-filled food production.
Yeah, so like I was saying, there's that tariff on the tin plate steel that U.S. steel can manufacturers need. That's being absorbed in the U.S. steel food can value chain. But foreign-filled food cans, they don't have to pay that Section 232 tariff. They're paying a much lower tariff cost. And to the Trump administration's credit, they had created this, what's called derivatives process, to add more finished downstream goods, like a filled food can, to the derivatives list, so that they would also have to pay the 232 tariff. But with the April 2nd, 2026 proclamation, the filled food cans, beverage cans that we had applied for weren't added. So that means that structural disadvantage exists where these foreign filled food cans are coming in. You could think of like peas, peaches, corn from China. So to give you an example, can of corn coming in from China, delivered in the Midwest, 40 cents. That same can of corn is 70 cents.
Wow.
So retailers are looking at that and they're saying, let's bring in more foreign filled food cans. And then more institutions, even like schools. And so school children are being fed more foreign food, and people at the grocery store, they're feeling the affordability issue from the tariffs adding cost to steel food cans overall. And they're also unknowingly buying more foreign-filled food cans because the country of origin labeling is so small, if there at all, and there's this cost advantage to retailers bringing in more foreign-filled food cans.
So we've got a couple minutes left. Tell us about the CANS Act. Who introduced it? What would it do?
Yes, so Representative Van Orden, Republican from Wisconsin, Representative Harder, Democrat from California. This is a bipartisan solution, bipartisan bill that would say, okay, if you're importing canned food, let's empower consumers. Make sure they understand where their food is coming from so that they can make their own choice based on quality, safety, price, other things they care about. So this would say you have to put that country of origin labeling on the front or the top of the can. That's what it would do.
And where does the bill stand? What committee does it go to? And what are its chances this year?
Yeah, so it's HR 914. It has Representative Van Orden, Representative Harder, but also 5 other Democrats, 5 other Republicans as co-sponsors. So we're hoping to get more additional co-sponsors alongside with. We think it has a chance because it is in line with the Trump administration's agenda to, as you were talking about earlier, to put America first and really American food first. So let's empower consumers in this fashion. I think it'd also be great if we strengthened Buy American provisions. It's already being done in the Farm Bill for school lunches. I think we can look at other ways to make sure that American tax dollars go to buying American food. And then more generally, let's rethink the tariff structure so that we put America first across the steel food can value chain and get rid of this entrenched advantage for foreign-filled food cans and put everyone on a level playing field, or even American food cans in a better position.
Scott Breen, the president of the Can Manufacturing Institute, welcome to the job. Also, congratulations.
Thank you.
You started in May?
Yeah, the week after the move to 50% tariffs.
Oh,
yes.
great. Good timing, good time. Well, thanks for joining us. Thanks for watching on 535. We'll be back in a few minutes.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
We are Lions International, one association of global volunteers, one foundation for humanitarian grants, shaping the future, one act of kindness at a time. We are on a mission to improve health and well-being, to strengthen communities, to serve a world in need. We are Lions International.
To learn more, visit lionsclubs.org.
America leads the world in medicine development.
It matters.
We get new medicines first, nearly 3 years faster.
5 million Americans go to work because we make medicines here at home.
And not relying on other countries keeps us safe. But China is racing to overtake us.
Will we let them?
Or will we choose to stay ahead?
When America leads,
America cures.
Let's tell Washington to keep us in the lead.
He is what your show is called, The Decider.
It's Washington's hottest new show, and it has the Beltway buzzing.
Americans, they know BS when they see BS.
Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Brody Mullins.
Is this era ending and is a new era beginning?
And veteran strategist Lisa Camuso Miller.
Have you ever had to tell a client no?
Talk to the biggest and most influential players.
We wanted $1 million. He said done.
Rewriting the rules of influence.
Business is going to be on the ballot.
Congress needs to do their job.
They become lapdogs rather than watchdogs.
The people who never talk.
That's such a good question.
Talk to them.
It was kind of fun, actually.
It's Washington's only show by and for insiders.
Welcome to The Deciders.
Watch weekly right here on 535.
You're watching 535.
This is 535.
535.
You're watching 535.
535.
535.
535.
We're live on Capitol Hill, and 535 starts right now.
Welcome back to 535. I'm Paul Kane of Notice, and I am joined here by Senator Peter Welch of Vermont, originally part of the 2006 Democratic class.
That's right, the majority makers.
The majority makers. And then elected in 2022, where the Democrats on the Senate side, where you actually gained a seat.
Well, that's right, and I succeeded Senator Leahy, who is an iconic figure here in Washington and, of course, back in Vermont. 48 years.
Yeah, wow. All right, so you're here to talk today about some bipartisan reform efforts to FEMA, disaster assistance. Give us a sense of, how bad things are right now, where projects currently stand, and sort of what this legislation would do, and sort of the chances that we have of this.
Well, there's two things about FEMA. Of course, number one, it's the federal organization that helps respond to extraordinary weather events that devastate communities. You know, and in Vermont on July 14th, in the last 3 years, we had major floods, one year after another. We've had hurricanes in North Carolina, wildfires in California, in Hawaii. And FEMA is really the federal entity where, when the aftermath of a storm and even preparing, it's got to be there to help communities. Second, FEMA's got a lot of programs to help people recover. And what I've seen with FEMA in our experience in Vermont and shared with others is that the immediate response from FEMA is usually quite good. They've got trained people, they've got assets, they've got organizational capability that our communities, especially small communities, don't have. But then second, the recovery is a total mess, and it gets super bureaucratic. So like in Vermont, when we're trying to figure out, do we replace an 18-inch culvert with a 36-inch culvert? The local people know the answer to that. Well, you got to go.
What's the answer?
The answer is the decision has to be made by the people who are on the scene, because it might be 18, it might be 36, but the way it is now, you've got to call somebody in Puerto Rico, and they've got a lot of other stuff on their desk and they don't have a clue. So the reform legislation that I'm sponsoring with Andy Kim, but have a lot of interest from my Republican colleagues, would essentially provide much more local control in order to fix a bridge. So we want to have much more local control and much more local responsibility.
To pick something that was a political flashpoint out of a disaster, Western North Carolina in the fall of 2024 in the Asheville area and the surrounding communities. It was just brutal, the flooding that hit there. And that was, President Trump was then former President Trump at the time, was, bashing Biden's FEMA for not getting things done. I get the sense that, if anything, the management of FEMA has been not as good, even as then.
Well,
the last
a
few
couple.
months.
We had Kristi Noem was the head of Homeland Security, and FEMA is under Homeland Security, and she did two things that were really terrible. Number one, she politicized it, so she said that no contract over $100,000 can be approved unless she signed off. And that's where Corey Lewandowski, her special government representative, there's a lot of suspicion that they were making money on this, or he was. And it totally held up any relief going to do even debris removal. And then secondly, she said she wanted to abolish FEMA, just wanted to get rid of it. And my view on that is that when she can guarantee North Carolina that they won't be in the path of a hurricane, or Vermont that we won't have a flood, sure, that's time. But weather events are going to occur despite what Kristi Noem says. So she really was undermining it, saying it had to be, basically saying it should be abolished, and also personally impeding getting any delivery out to help folks in the aftermath of a storm.
I realize it's only been a month or so since he was confirmed. Mark Wayne Mullen, a former senator, a former House member who you served with. I know you didn't vote for him, but have you seen any inkling of a better relationship with the Senate and Democrats in general?
I have.
Give me an example.
Well,
Why?
Mark Wayne understands that communities that get hit by a storm, they don't have the fiscal capacity, and they don't have the technical expertise, they don't have the equipment. So FEMA does have to continue playing a role, and I think he gets that. And also, he started getting out the relief that Noem had been, that communities were entitled to, but Noem was sitting on and not processing the checks. So the money that Vermont was entitled to for storms in 2020, in 23 and 24 is starting to come in, and I attribute that to Mark Wayne Mullen's attention to this.
There are still checks that are coming in from the 2023 storms?
That's right. Hard to believe. And by the way, this isn't just Vermont. I mean, I'm so engaged in this because Vermont had these 3 storms on 3 successive July 14ths, but we had a big,
same. I'm sorry.
Same day.
Forgive me for not knowing this. It was the same day, and it had massive flooding 3 straight years.
July 14, and we're crossing our fingers that it doesn't happen again this July 14. But no, it's tragic. I was visiting a family who had major damage to their home in July 14 of 2023, and it was July 14. They were just moving back in July of 2024. The flood came, and they were back to where they started. So no, it's really, really tough on the families, and that's that is why the local control is so important, because the local officials are responsive to their community, and the folks who are affected, a small business or a family in their home, they can get an answer. They know who to talk to. And then number 2, they have a sense of urgency about putting their community back together. So the local control component that is the heart of our legislation is something that's appealing to a lot of my Republican colleagues as well.
Well, Republicans generally like the idea, conservatives have liked the idea of devolving federal government down and just sort of saying, here's the block grants, they used to call them, to local communities. But is there any concern about sometimes local officials either aren't as smart or don't have might not be as ethically careful as a federal official and expert on the issue?
Valid concern. So there's 2 things. Number 1, there's got to be a partnership here, because a small community that is absolutely devastated with a flood, a fire, a hurricane, they just don't have the tax capacity to put it all back together. And this is where whether it was the Sandy storm in New Jersey, the wildfires in Hawaii, we've got to treat our fellow citizens as our neighbors. And that means the federal government has to provide that fiscal capacity. But second, the local control and implementation, I'm in 100% agreement. Now, accountability, that's what our Justice Department is for. If anybody messes with that money and does inappropriate things, they should be prosecuted and they should go to jail. But you really cannot get around the reality that if you're talking about my community, let's say in Montpelier, where we had wicked flooding, the folks in Montpelier are going to be in a better position and feel much more urgency to get that solved than folks that are affiliated with FEMA but may be stationed in Texas or Puerto Rico.
And I would imagine that Secretary Mullen, coming from Oklahoma, basically right there in Tornado Alley, they've had some really horrible natural disasters there. He's got to be pretty familiar with FEMA and how it works and doesn't work.
That's right. So, again, these events are happening, and they're happening with more frequency, and they're more devastating. And the NOAA approach was, we'll just abolish FEMA, and the communities have to survive and recover on their own. They can't do it. So that's just, like a neighbor refusing to come to the aid of his or her neighbor with a hose when the neighbor's house is burning down is kind of a cruel approach. Also, FEMA is totally messed up in some ways with this oversight. You asked about accountability because we have to have it. But we have spent more money in monitoring debris removal than we spend on the actual debris removal itself, okay? So
monitoring debris removal?
Yeah, so after a storm...
what does that actually entail?
Well,
it sounds like you're just watching.
That's the point, okay? They would hire people to make sure that the contractors who were picking up the fallen trees and all of the debris and everything that happened, like in a devastating, you mentioned North Carolina, they would be paying people, contractors, to pick up the debris. You got to get it out. But they'd be paying as much or more to people who were like looking over the shoulder and monitoring what they're doing. And it's absurd because, with like drone technology, you can really get an assessment of how much debris is out there and do a contract that you could bid out to a local contractor. So there's real reforms that we could make in how things are administered that would save an immense amount of money. In my view, is that you really want to have the maximum amount of money going to helping the community recover, helping those small businesses reopen, helping those families get back in their homes.
And there's a real push inside Democratic think tanks, policy folks who are trying to say that one of the things Democrats need to do, and this is sort of getting back to like the Clinton-Gore days of, we got to make government work so that people see it functioning in the right way, in the right manner. Because there are a lot of people who just sort of look at government as this sort of corrupt entity in a way where it's just inefficient.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, honestly, it was so heartbreaking to be meeting families, as I did after these storms, and 6 months or a year in, they've recovered from the initial trauma, but they are struggling to get an answer, one way or the other. Do they get a buyout for their home? Does their business get a loan to get back on their feet? And they're alone on that. In the immediate aftermath of a storm, everybody is there helping muck out the basement and coming over with food to help them get through that initial. But then everybody goes back to their lives. But if it's your home, you don't have your home.
Yeah.
And then if you can't even get an answer to a question about what aid you're entitled to and when it will come, it leads to despair and discouragement and rightly a frustration with government.
At one point earlier this year, you hosted a meeting with 2 or 3 former FEMA chiefs.
Right.
And I believe a dozen senators, but it was bipartisan.
Right. That's right.
I don't want to do anything to blow up those talks, but where are you in the process of trying to get this turned into law, turned into a real reform?
We are, number one, we convene and I think share some principles. The folks who were there all have experienced weather events. Mm-hmm. And again, the weather events have no political favorites.
No.
You're Republican or Democrat, you can't dodge the storm that's coming your way. And second, there was a frustration with the follow-through on FEMA, what I'm talking about, and a consensus about local control. We're in a better place now because I think the new Secretary of Homeland Security, Mark Wayne Mullen, is empathetic to A, the need for federal help in a disaster, and B, local control. So we had to wait around. It's good that Noma's gone because she was a total obstacle to this. Mm-hmm. And so I have some optimism that we can make some progress on this.
I don't want to push you too hard, but when you say optimism, is this something that can be wrapped up and included in some must-pass bill later this year? Or
well, that would be the goal, but I don't know that it will be. Okay. I mean, I think the next thing we would like to do is get together with Mark Wayne. He also has appointed a new head of FEMA, so they're getting back on track now that Noam is gone, and I think they'll act in good faith. And also, Mullen does have good relationships with members of the Senate where he served. Now, the $64 question is always where's President Trump going to be? Because what my experience very clearly is, unless he gives the okay, then my Republican colleagues tend not to challenge that.
Yeah, would you, if the Democrats were so lucky to win the majority next year and actually have control over some of these gavels, do you want to do some more investigating and digging around in FEMA and how that all unfolded? And, especially
with
Noam and Lewandowski.
Absolutely.
And the $100,000.
Look, it stinks, all right? And there's a lot of indicators out there that what Noam was doing and Lewandowski was doing was not on the level. And the Inspector General is now investigating that. Press is investigating it. And there's a lot of stories about whether there were kickbacks or not. I don't know for certain. But why in the world would you have a limit on the contracts that had to be personally approved by Noam, other than to either A, stop the aid from going out, or to be in on the action when the contract is going to be let. So I think there's a lot of suspicion about the Lewandowski-Noem regime.
It really was one of those things that I heard about all the time. Republicans, when they thought she was in good favor with Trump, wouldn't openly criticize her, but boy, they would talk behind her back about how they really felt like she was totally mismanaging that situation.
Well, and again, you know, you're in North Carolina. Ted Budd, my colleague, is there, and was really concerned about what happened to his community. And I'm here in Vermont, and you know, you've got a Homeland Security Department that's not acting, or FEMA, and something's not on the level. That hurts his constituents and it hurts mine. I mean, this is a bipartisan concern. How do we help our neighbors when they've been in the path of a horrible weather event?
Do you think how much of this was they were so focused on immigration and border security that they just took their eye off of what was another critical piece of the...
She didn't care. I mean, look, bottom line, she said, let's abolish FEMA. How can somebody say that when each day or each month we're waking up and having enormous empathy when we see this incredible hurricane and flood in North Carolina, or those horrible fires and weather events in Texas? You know, everybody is, when you see that, you see those portraits of families losing their homes. It's there, but for the grace of God go I. So I think Americans want to help fellow citizens when they, through no fault of their own, have suffered a grievous loss. Noem said, let's abolish the department. So it was not the kinder, gentler approach to natural disasters.
Okay. This is a special segment that we do here. We call it the 535 1 minute. It's sort of a reference to your old House days. Just sort of rapid fire. What is the best part of being in Congress?
Being able to help Vermonters.
All right. What's the most difficult part of being in Congress?
It's broken, and we just don't address real issues like the debt, the deficit. We don't deal with health care. You know, we don't function the way a good legislative body should.
If you could fix one thing institutionally about the place, what would it be?
It would be that we stand up for the prerogatives of Congress on spending, on taxing, and on war powers. That's our constitutional responsibility, and we're deferring too much to the executive.
All right. Where's the best food in Vermont?
Any maple creamy stand. And summer is here, and I'm starting to eat my maple creamies.
What's the best committee?
Well, I do like them all, but I love the Ag Committee because I have such a connection to rural life, and I think rural life is the heart of America, and it tends to be the most bipartisan. But I like finance and judiciary for all the combat we do there.
Who's the smartest member of Congress that you've served with?
You know, I think Amy Klobuchar is right up there. She is smart, and she is hardworking.
All right. Who's your favorite Republican that you've ever served with?
Well, the funniest is that I've ever served with?
Yeah, ever.
Well, I was going to say John Kennedy in the Senate has got a great sense of humor, but you know, don't tell anybody this, but I really like Trey Gowdy.
Oh, wow.
But
really?
I'll keep that on the down low. I don't want to hurt his reputation.
What is the one phrase, the weirdest phrase that you hear uttered here that if you said it back home in Vermont, people would not understand?
Votorama.
Oh boy, how late do you think it's going to go?
I don't know. You know, I fear to. I hope short. We'll see.
All right, everybody. Well, that's all the time we have for this. We will have you back on at some other point. Rest up. You could have a long votorama tonight, tomorrow, who knows, on the Senate side. We really appreciate it, and we'll be right back.
Thanks, Paul.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
There are moments that shape an organization's future. A policy shift, a crisis or investigation, a market shock. When that moment hits, the clock starts. Markets move in minutes. Regulators, employees, and customers respond instantly. Narrative helps leaders respond with pace, engage stakeholders with precision, and position brands with perspective. So when challenges emerge, you can navigate complexity and lead with clarity before the narrative.
I enlisted as a medic to be there to help my patients, and after an injury, I found myself as a patient. I experienced post-traumatic seizures. Depression is a big one that comes along with it, PTSD. So I pursued my PhD in neuroscience and regenerative medicine. The coalition has helped fund my academic pursuits. They genuinely care about helping the vet in whatever way that they can. Through supporting the coalition, you're supporting some of the veterans that have the biggest needs.
Visit saluteheroes.org to learn more.
National Association of Realtors Advocacy, working to expand access to housing and defend property rights so that more Americans can build generational wealth and prosperity through home ownership, a critical voice in nearly 1/5 of the U.S. economy. Supporting 2 jobs for every single-family home sold, and generating more than $760 billion of property tax revenue for state and local governments each year. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors.
A simple blood test can detect Alzheimer's years before symptoms appear. Congress can connect Americans to early, accurate dementia diagnosis by supporting the Bipartisan Alzheimer's Screening and Prevention Act, allowing Medicare to cover blood-based Alzheimer's screening. Congress has acted to cover mammograms and other life-saving screenings. Now it can redefine Alzheimer's care, unlocking early detection and access to FDA-approved treatments when they work best. Congress, it's up to you. Paid for by the Alzheimer's Association.
Back on 535, it's Scott McFarland, joined now by Congresswoman Sidney Kamlinger-Dove, Judiciary Committee member from Los Angeles, the City of Angels. You got about 1/3 of the city in your district.
I do.
And that is a heck of a commute you have built for yourself to serve your constituents.
Amen to that, Scott. It's an honor to serve. I don't know if I'm saying that the entire 5 hours I'm on the plane, but I certainly stay it when I get back home, and I feel the pressure when I'm here to deliver for my constituents and the American people.
Let's talk about the bill that has gotten our attention, the Pregnant Women in Custody legislation. This is a maternal health piece of legislation that expands what's been proposed in the past. Start off, Congresswoman, tell us what this includes.
So first, I'm just so glad that you're interested because real talk, women are incarcerated every single day. But we never think about it because when we're thinking about jails and prisons and detention facilities, oftentimes we're thinking about men.
Yep.
But the fastest growing population in our prisons are women, up 600%. And the majority of the women that are incarcerated or detained are mothers. They're either pregnant or they are nursing or they are mothers. And so my bill recognizes this reality, and is proposing guardrails on how we can, acknowledge the fact that women and pregnant women and nursing women are being detained, and B, what kinds of transparency we need, what kinds of administrative accounting we need, and how we can provide better services for them.
The proposals in the past addressed women who are in Federal Bureau of Prisons custody. That's part of your jurisdiction. That is your jurisdiction.
Right.
This expands for another subset of expected moms who are in some form of custody.
Correct. So the original bill was about folks that were in federal facilities. We know that they're being shackled when they're giving birth. We know that if they're having complicated pregnancies, they're not getting the help they need. We know that if they're suffering from postpartum depression, they're also not getting the medical attention they need. Obviously, what we have seen over the course of these past months with ICE and Border Patrol, we know that women are being detained in these detention facilities. They are also pregnant. A report came out that said over 350 women pregnant postpartum nursing reported 16 miscarriages because CBP and ICE are not doing their job. So my bill brought back to expand to include these agencies to really address the inhumanity that we're seeing coming from these agencies.
Some of this correctional work is subcontracted or contracted out to private employers, private companies. How does the legislation get after that? I can see how you'd have direct oversight over what CBP does in its own operated facility, or what the Bureau of Prisons does at the federal prisons, California and elsewhere. But how are you getting after the contractors who get this work offloaded on them?
Well, so it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, it's all federal dollars, it's taxpayer dollars that are being used. So yes, in many instances, they're contracting with a private entity that's actually running the facility, but they still have to be subject to congressional federal oversight. They still have to do reporting. We still need an accounting of what they're offering, and they should be required to provide the same kind of services that the federal government would be if it was running the entire facility. And we know that this isn't true because they're being cheap and inhumane in how they are operating these facilities. And as a result, women are dying, children are being separated, miscarriages are happening, and that's not something that should happen. Now, I should say that under the Biden administration, they had a policy that said they would not detain or deport pregnant women. But the Trump administration reversed that, which is why I think we're seeing these numbers. And we don't even know if these are the real numbers. These are just the numbers that we've been getting when pushing the administration.
Is this an indication, the argument you're making, of unique negligence of women's health, or what I hear that some people are concerned about any health care in prison, that men would also be disadvantaged in whatever their unique needs are?
It is, and it's also recognizing that we have a court system that is not meeting the needs of the folks that are entering into these prisons and facilities. And so my bill is really to take a more collaborative approach to how we're dealing with folks who are incarcerated. And given the fact that women are the fastest growing population, I think it's important that we start with them, and hoping that a high tide will rise all boats, even for the men who are incarcerated as well.
You mentioned the report about, I think the NBC report about 350 cases. Is there more data you're bringing to the table to try to convince your colleagues to either join your legislation or to help champion it back home with their constituents?
Yeah, so before I came to Congress, I worked on this issue when I was in the state legislature, and what we learned was that women were not given tampons or menstrual products. We learned that they were not getting bras and underwear. We were learning that they were not getting access to OBGYN care.
Were they undercounting how many women were going to be in custody? Were they not being mindful of the fact that there is a growing population?
I would say it was just negligence. They were saying, we don't have the money, this isn't something we were thinking of, and quite honestly, they were saying, well, you all didn't ask. So I said, well, I'm going to start asking. I want to know the number of women that are being sexually assaulted when they come. I want to know the number of women who came in not pregnant and then all of a sudden miraculously became pregnant. I want to know the number of women who are working in law enforcement and in the prisons, or how they are being trained, how the men wardens are being trained. I want to know what kind of food they're being given, medical attention they're being given, vocational training they're being given. I want to know if you're asking them about their trauma, how they got here. Because in the majority of instances, women are in prison because of a man or a partner that they were sort of hooked up with for economic reasons often, and they end up with stiffer penalties. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna start asking all the questions. I shouldn't have to do that, but that's my job.
I used to work years ago in a local newsroom where I would try to do reporting on issues involving corrections. I had an editor who said, nobody cares about people in jail. You're not going to get the audience's attention. I suspect you feel some symmetrical dynamic when you try to get people's attention about issues involving those who are housed in correctional facilities versus other people you help represent.
Yeah, the reality is a lot of us know somebody who's been touched by the carceral system, but it's not a story we want to share because there's a lot of shame that's connected to it. And we think, well, these folks have disappeared and then miraculously they're going to re-enter our community and they're going to be fine. And that is not the story the majority of the time. You have women who are incarcerated, and what's happening to their kids? Who's taking care of their kids? Do they end up in foster care? Do they get adopted out? Does the parent know that? Do they have privileges where they can visit them? What happens when someone in your family dies? Are you allowed a privilege to at least even phone into the funeral? I mean, these are like basic things that we should be thinking about. The trauma that got you in here. Let's be a little more collaborative about the vocational training that you need. Are they being trained to do a skill that they're not going to need when they get out, and then you expect them to be successful upon reentry? I mean, come on. Are we then sending them back to the community that actually sent them to the jail or prison in the first place? Like, let's have some real conversations about this, because you know what? It costs a lot of money to run these correctional facilities. And my hope is that we can spend less because fewer people are going in them.
Effective reentry prevents recidivism, or at least minimizes that, which is a cost savings. I want to ask you broadly about maternal health. It's been a priority of yours, both at the state and now that you're here in the Congress. Do you have an easier time extending the bipartisan olive branch on issues involving maternal health? Because it charitably seems to be viewed as non-political, much less charged than other issues.
It's interesting. In an ideal world, I would have Republicans on all of the bills that I'm championing in this area, but it has become so partisan that now it's hard to find it. But I tell you, there are Republican women and Democratic women in Congress who are pregnant or who just had a child. And many of them share stories about complicated pregnancies, about miscarriages, about stillbirths, about the trauma of giving birth. It is still a very dangerous proposition. So if you each have these stories as Republicans and Democrats, then why couldn't we work together more often on addressing maternal health issues? I don't understand why many of these women don't want to be part of this larger conversation when you're talking to the American people.
Is there something they view as political in some of your proposals?
Well, I will say,
there must be something they see as unappealing.
I think the political part is that it's being authored by a Democratic woman from a blue state. But I will tell you, I worked with
Would they call some of it an unfunded mandate on local jurisdictions?
Some of them do. Some of them want to suggest that we shouldn't be offering these kinds of services to certain women. I think there's an assumption that the majority of the services would go to black and brown women, since the majority of women that are incarcerated tend to be black and brown. But we can extrapolate and just go back to maternal health for everyone, and Republicans should be on board. And then you have a politicized anecdote about how, I as a Republican had challenges getting health care in my district because Democrats politicized maternal health and have made my doctor afraid to provide the kind of care that I need during my pregnancy. I mean, I actually have heard that from a Republican colleague, and I said, well, you're politicizing your healthcare journey, because there are so many women, RSDs, independents, you name it, who are going to doctors, who are having complicated pregnancies, and who want a doctor who can address their needs and give them the healthcare they deserve.
So what do you do? How do you calibrate it to make it more appealing? To get sufficient votes for one of these things to pass?
Yeah. You remind folks about the stories that we all have in each of our districts, and that they're really agnostic in terms of party, but they should be addressed. You talk about what the carceral systems look like in each of our states. You share stories of women who have gone through the system, and many of their stories are very traumatic, and they're just asking for us to work together to help solve those problems. And you work really hard. What I try to do is work really hard to connect to the humanity of my Republican colleagues. And in many instances, it's there. You just have to pull really hard to get it out. And then design bills that are nonpartisan, that are agnostic.
What are some of the other maternal health proposals you've offered or think about offering in the months ahead?
I think it's incredibly important that we are funding training and education in our medical schools. We know that bias exists. We know that women don't get the services that we all need, because really this healthcare system is designed for men and not women. I say it all the time, how we are prescribed. I'm really interested in looking at senior women. They think that once you're of a certain age, you're not sexual, you don't want to be intimate, and so they stop offering you OBGYN care on a regular basis. I think that is bad and wrong. And just interested in how we can continue to provide more resources and access for our new mothers, many of whom are working, and it's really hard for them to afford formula and food for their babies. And how are we supporting them? It's pre, post, pregnancy. It's the full cycle of a woman and a child.
When it comes to the cutbacks the federal government has made to so many of these agencies, and the Health and Human Services has suffered quite a bit. The buyouts have gutted so many other agencies. Is there a need to address this in the appropriations process moving forward to get more funding and get more grants out to your community?
Absolutely. During the shutdown and when we were debating HR 1, I was going to WIC clinics, and I was crying at each stop I made because they were saying we're going to cut the money we give to new mothers to buy food and vegetables for their babies, or that they weren't coming in because they were scared that they would be attacked by an ICE agent and deported. And we're having those conversations. And then now we're having conversations about a $1.8 billion ballroom just for one individual, when how much of that could go to school lunches, how much of that could go to EBT and food stamps, how much of that could go to health clinics to keep them open. In my district, 50 community clinics could close because of HR 1, and a couple of hospitals. So what does that look like for new families and new moms and little kids?
We've heard from a number of your colleagues, including inside the CDC, about rural hospital shortages, the closures of rural hospitals, the shortage, the deserts of providers. So you're in a major city where presumably you have more money circulating or more providers available. Do you have a shortage?
Yes, sir.
How pronounced is it?
It's incredibly pronounced. So I have a hospital right outside my district. It's a glossy one, and over 50% of the patients they see are indigent care. I didn't know that. I talked to the hospital and they said, well, we're not going to close down, but what we are tracking are the 3 or 4 hospitals that are proximate to us that are. And so we're going to be hemorrhaging because we're going to have to take their patients. And we're looking at 2/3 of our patient care will be indigent. I have had numerous conversations with community clinics who are struggling to keep the doors open. So what does that mean? It means fewer providers that look like you, fewer providers that are closer to you.
I would assume fewer providers.
Yeah.
You want any part of that?
I mean, most providers are like, I'm in it for the long term because I took the Hippocratic Oath and I want to provide care. But what they're also saying is, I still also have to feed my family. And the reimbursements are getting lower. The patient care is getting more acute because folks are waiting longer to come to us because they really can't afford to get here. And that's problematic. So locally, we're sort of taking this issue into our own hands to try and find solutions. But it's not the job of every county, city, or state to do this. It really is the obligation of the federal government.
Something you can do if you get a gavel in January, or your party does, with your committees to try to mechanize some of this?
Well, my first thought was I want to hit somebody in the head with it because I'm so mad, but I won't do that. I won't do that. But we are going to have to subpoena everybody and bring everybody in and open the books. So as it relates to health care, you know, how much has actually been allocated? Where has it really gone? Let me see the metrics. You know, have you seen drops in some of these really bad statistics that are plaguing my community, rural communities and urban communities? Because people say I pay taxes, so I want to see them go to something. And healthcare, I think, is incredibly prevalent right now and on everyone's mind. So I think every single person, if you're CDC, if you're HHS, Department of Ag, needs to come in and tell us how you are serving the American people. My suspicion is that because many of these agencies have been gutted, they're not. They're doing the bare minimum, which is why people are getting poorer, people are getting sicker, and people are getting madder.
Just a few minutes left, so we have to enter our speed round.
Okay.
The speed round's fun, I promise you.
Okay.
I mean, I promise you, but I can't really guarantee I'm going to deliver. We ask members about their districts. If I go into your district in California, what is the best food that people don't know about, or the best food that your go-to? Or we're taking you out for your birthday. Where are we taking you?
You're going to take me to a taco truck. Okay. Probably Leo's, probably in Mid-City, and we're going to stay there all damn day.
I'm sorry. The truck. It sounds cheaper, I'm not going to lie, which is not...
It's kind of not sometimes.
Okay.
There's some cuisines, there's some like Michelin star trucks.
All right.
I might make you take me to Whole Box, which is actually in the southern part of the district, and it's all fish and Michelin star.
How much of a nightmare is it to get around your district? I mean, I'm sorry, in California, especially in Los Angeles,
Fighting words.
we see the images of the traffic.
Traffic is tough, but just think, it's sunny, you might have a sunroof, you can also just pull over and get a great coffee. But let me tell you something, DC traffic is worse than LA traffic.
I know, we got ours too. You mentioned the 5-hour commute. I like to ask California, Oregon, and Washington State members, how do you sustain that? It really is, I have to assume, wear and tear for members, especially members with families, try to do that.
Lots of movies, lots of books, meditation.
Mindfulness.
Yes, mindfulness.
Which also helps with the traffic we were just talking about.
Yes, mindfulness.
Lastly, when you're here, what do you find to be either a colleague whose intellect is a North Star for you? Who do you view to be a mentor? Who in the 535 is somebody who you think is someone you want to emulate?
Well, the smartest member of Congress is generally the quietest member because they're the one that is observing and listening. I will say, I really like Joe Neguse. He is masterful, brilliant, thoughtful, professional. He's a great mentor.
Joe Neguse of Colorado, Cindy Kamlinger-Dove, California. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate you watching 535. There's a bounty of untold stories, some of which come in the form of the phrase taco truck. We'll be right back.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
National Association of Realtors Advocacy, working to expand access to housing and defend property rights so that more Americans can build generational wealth and prosperity through home ownership, a critical voice in nearly 1/5 of the U.S. economy. Supporting 2 jobs for every single-family home sold, and generating more than $760 billion of property tax revenue for state and local governments each year. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors.
Welcome back to 535. I'm Brody Mullins here with Joe Maloney, making 535 history today, our first 2-time guest, back-to-back weeks.
Thrilled to be here.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for joining us. Tell me about this hearing yesterday in the Senate Commerce Committee, the Consumer Protection Subcommittee, on sports betting and proposition betting. What happened?
Sure. It's going to be a new phenomenon, I think, for Congress. When I spoke with you last week, we described a growing interest in sports betting. The broad legalization that's taken place now, 40 jurisdictions plus the District of Columbia, it's going to begin to warrant some scrutiny and some examination by Congress specifically. So yesterday marked the 3rd Senate hearing, since legalization post-2018 in the Supreme Court decision. And according to Chairman Cruz and Subcommittee Chair Marsha Blackburn from the state of Tennessee, this could be the first in a series of hearings examining different corridors of legalization of sports wagering across the country. Yesterday, the attention was definitely on prediction market platforms and state-regulated sports books and their commitment to integrity, fair play, what it means. And there were 5 witnesses that showed up yesterday to discuss that with, a pretty decent amount of senators that came to learn a lot more about this issue specifically.
So it's interesting that the hearing was billed as sports betting, but a clue we can read into already is that it was immediately shifted to prediction models. That's what people want to talk about these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of the attention-grabbing markets you're seeing on prediction market platforms tied to wars, tied to culture, tied to other events, but now specifically sports event contracts and what that means in the overall discussion around legalization. The legalization as we know it with sports wagering has occurred in the states and with tribes. Those are the traditional regulatory frameworks for all forms of gaming. Now, with the onset of prediction market platforms, this was certainly the first occasion where you saw, outside of the Senate Agriculture Committee and the confirmation of Mike Seelig as CFTC chairperson, where this activity is actually regulated federally. The discussion today was, hey, what does this all mean right now when it comes to integrity? Well, this all means to ensure that matches are fair, that games are fair. And it was an opportunity for members of the Senate Commerce Committee to ask some questions. They've done that through the confirmation process with the CFTC and Chairman Seelig. Now these senators had a chance to learn a little bit more.
Great. So you were in the hearing, we were not. So let's make you into a reporter, prepared to take a big pay cut. Tell us about how the hearing started. Senator Blackburn led off. What did she say in her opening remarks?
Chairwoman Blackburn has taken an interest in this, and as a result of her dual committee assignments at the Judiciary Committee, which first looked into sports wagering in December of 2024. She's got some familiarity with these issues. She's long put pressure and applied pressure on leagues and the sports books that I represent on integrity and what it means. And so this is this idea of fair competition. She led off with that, but she acknowledged in the room a lot of interest about prediction market platforms. She invited her home state regulator, Mary Beth Thomas, who is the chairperson of the Tennessee Sports Wagering Council. That's the de facto regulator in the state of Tennessee. So she offered her an opportunity to discuss how state regulations apply to integrity and how they promote integrity.
And she was the first witness?
She was one of the first witnesses as well. So she opened her remarks acknowledging this is a first in a series of discussions that the committee would like to have with sportsbooks, leagues, and prediction market representatives.
And then some of the industry representatives testified also. Tell us about that.
Sure. So American Gaming Association CEO Bill Miller spoke, and he spoke to the redundancies and how legalization is working, the importance of state regulatory frameworks. He drew a very sharp contrast with the prediction market witness, former Congressman, former House Financial Services Chairperson Patrick McHenry, who is now a senior advisor to the Coalition for Prediction Markets. That's a coalition chiefly made up of Kalshi and other vendors in that ecosystem. He spoke about some of the approaches to integrity that exist within the prediction market category. The third witness, importantly, was the founder and CEO of Integrity Compliance 360, a gentleman named Scott Sedin. Integrity monitors are third-party vendors within state-regulated and tribal-regulated ecosystems, as well as now prediction markets. They ensure that integrity frameworks have a third party identifying betting patterns that can be shared with the leagues and with law enforcement. So when there are those irregularities and some of that abnormal activity, like a massive line movement an hour before the game, they're flagging that activity, alerting law enforcement, alerting leagues, saying, hey, there's some irregular line movement, there's some high volume activity occurring within these betting markets, it's something to look into. And then the additional witness beyond the four we just discussed was Harry Levant, who is a gambling counselor and somebody that is actually an acknowledged in recovery a former gambling addict. And he is actually part of a public health consortium that's looking at this activity and through the lens of a public health approach. He was bringing the perspective of, hey, what does this mean for gambling addiction? What does this mean for children being exposed to messages? So there really was actually a well-balanced, I'd say, and it's, of course, I'm an advocate too, but would agree that I think the committee put together as an initial touch point a pretty well-balanced look at the industry and kind of where we are right now.
And tell us about McHenry. What were his points in his initial testimony? What kind of questions did he receive?
Reasserting the authority of the CFTC to police these event contracts. There's a really, really big difference between the state-regulated sportsbook model and these event contracts that are offering event contracts on, the Knicks Cavaliers series or, the Spurs Thunder game last night. And so that's something that is very specific and where Chairman Cruz was particularly interested. He went in and described the CFTC's authority and the CFTC's ability to police some of the concerns that were being voiced around integrity and the lack of some of the traditional constraints that exist within the sportsbook model that Mary Beth Thomas, the regulator from Tennessee, really punctuated in her testimony. The guardrails that exist, the consumer protections that exist, and the work that the regulators do to hold sportsbooks accountable to monitor this activity, report it to these integrity monitors, and then ultimately allow law enforcement and leagues to come in and conduct investigations. Mr. McHenry was very quick to assert the role of prediction market platforms within that ecosystem, defend their ability to provide these event contracts, and speak to some of the redundancies that exist within those markets.
So this is very, very early in the legislative process. I mean, Congress is nowhere near regulating, passing any sort of laws here. There's a few bills out there right now that don't seem to have much support. But given how early this is, was there any semblance of any sort of consensus, or can you get a sense at all of where this could be going?
If I were to be completely fair, there seemed to be growing concern. The consensus was growing concern around the onset of prediction markets, their ability to essentially have the opportunity to platform this activity, which some would call gambling and some would call trading, to all 50 states. So Senator Curtis from Utah, a member of the subcommittee, a state that has not allowed gaming or gambling in any regulated form, had some very specific questions for Mr. McHenry. Mr. Schatz, a Democrat from Hawaii, another state, has not permitted any form of legal regulated gaming in his state. they had questions for Mr. McHenry. So that's really, I think, the tip of the spear here. We are in the very early innings of even just determining what is the appropriate role for Congress and the federal government in something that has been traditionally deferred to the states, that being commercial gaming, tribal gaming, and now legal regulated online sports wagering. The entry of prediction markets is, like I said last week on this show, forcing Congress to take a closer look now. Okay, what does this mean if we have a Senate-confirmed appointee and a group of Senate-confirmed commissioners as a sub-agency of the executive branch permitting and supposedly policing sports event contracts and kind of what that means? It's very early innings. I'd say Congress is in the very toddler phase of its potential parenting around some of these issues.
So, given that how early that is, I mean, you and I know from being around DC and Congress long enough, Congress rarely regulates an industry or takes action on an industry unless the industry sort of come together and has a consensus proposal. Is it too early for the industry here to start talking about potential proposals that they would accept?
Well, certainly not able to speak on behalf of the prediction market industry, but there's obviously one very big brand, one giant elephant in the room right now, that's Kalshi. They've started the Coalition for Prediction Markets. The other large entrant is a firm called Polymarket. They're just obtaining their US licensing. It'll be interesting to see how those two behemoths come and decide to work together. You know, I think what is typically going to take place is there's going to be a period of self-regulatory standards that are going to stand up. Credit to my former employer, the American Gaming Association, very early on after the Supreme Court's decision to, undo and invalidate the federal ban on states regulating this activity, set forward a path for sports books to come together and pursue self-regulatory standards. Those self-regulatory standards exist within the advertising component specifically. Those standards have been invoked and embraced in statute by states. So we have the opportunity, as I spoke to last week, to come into these opportunities and say, okay, here's actually our advertising standards. We don't cast people under the age of 25. We don't target people under the age of 21. We verify all types of identity to ensure the person is of age using this, and if they're not, they're banned or they're kicked off, and other responsible gaming standards. I think you're going to begin to see the prediction market category take on some of those actual duties and obligations, absent formal regulation, but in the interest of self-regulatory standards.
Joe Maloney, thanks so much for joining us on 535. We'll catch you next time. Thank you. We'll be right back in a minute.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back. You're watching 535.
This is 535.
535.
You're watching 535.
535.
535.
535.
We're live on Capitol Hill, and 535 starts right now.
Welcome back to 535 News. This is Paul Kane of Notice. We are here to wrap up our second week. It's been eventful. It's been great. We can't wait to see you next time. Congress is out next week for Memorial Day recess. That means we will be back here in the Cannon House office building on June 2nd. Hearing no objections, I'm going to ask for unanimous consent that we adjourn the show until June 2nd. Hearing no objections, we are done. We'll see you after the recess. Thanks again.